you'll join with me in toasting Her Majesty's good health."
This was met with a murmur of good wishes and a few raised glasses, but it didn't change the mood in the room. It looked more like a standoff than a dinner party. Marin Karn, for instance, looked like he could chew rocks and spit out gravel.
"Sit down, Lord Matalon, and eat," the king said. "This is the Saints' Day. It is not the appropriate time to discuss the state of the war. We will take it up when the Thane Council meets." "You have not called a council in months, Your Majesty," the eye-patched lord said. "Instead, you seize property and treasure from your loyal bannermen to fund this never-ending grudge match."
A rumble rolled around the table, mingled protest and dissent. Reliable royal ally Michel Beaudetort stood as well.
"I beg you, Arshal, let's defer this." "I agree," General Karn said. "I've not yet had the chance to brief His Majesty on recent developments." "Then by all means, Karn, let us brief him now," Matalon said. He scanned the room. "I believe we have a quorum." "Perhaps the ladies should leave the room," the king said, eyes glittering, his hand on his sword, "so that we can speak plainly." "Perhaps they should," Matalon said.
The women rose in a rustle of silk and brocade and left the room, all except the queen. "I will stay and hear what you have to say, Lord Matalon," she said simply.
Matalon shrugged. "If you like, Your Majesty."
He turned to the boy.
"My son Robert is a corporal stationed at Delphi. He has a report to offer. Corporal?"
Robert was so nervous that the paper in his hand was shaking.
Delphi has fallen, Your Majesty."
"Delphi?" Ash struggled to maintain his street face while he scanned the room for reactions. If he was any judge, Marin Karn, the king, and Beaudetort, at least, already knew. The king waved an impatient hand.
"Rumors are always flying about this or that disaster. I have heard a rumor about Delphi, and we are in the process of investigating." "It is more than a rumor, Your Majesty," Lord Matalon said. "Go on, Corporal."
Robert stood ramrod straight.
"I spent the solstice holiday at Temple Church, on leave from my posting at Delphi. While I was there, I received a message from my brother, from Captain Matalon's headquarters north of the city. Shall I read it?"
"Go ahead, son," Matalon said, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. Robert cleared his throat and read.
"A miners' riot has turned into a full-blown rebellion, supplemented with what appear to be Felsian Highlanders from the north. The rebels now control the mines, the heights, and the town, and our headquarters is under attack."
Robert swallowed hard.
"As it is unlikely that reinforcements from Temple Church can arrive in such time and in such numbers as to change the outcome, I recommend against risking more troops until a sufficient force can be deployed to assure a decisive victory. Captain Halston Matalon, Commander, His Majesty's Army, Delphi."
The entire room had gone silent with shock. General Karn spoke.
"It sounds to me like Captain Matalon is making excuses for his poor performance."
Blotches of color blossomed on Lord Matalon's cheeks.
"Explain, General," he said. "First off, everybody knows that the Northerners never poke a toe south of the Spirit Mountains," General Karn said. "Even if they decided to change their tactics, only a fool would attempt to bring a force through the Spirit Mountains at this time of year. The passes have been closed for a month." "Perhaps," Matalon said, biting off each word, "the Witch Queen has decided to spend the winter in the south this year. Perhaps her mages melted all the snow with sorcery. All I know is that from the beginning of this damnable war, Every assurance we have received, every prediction that has been made, every report that victory is at hand has been wrong."
Montaigne directed his response to the entire room.
"As many of you know, Lord Matalon's support for the war and his loyalty to our person have been lukewarm for some time. Which leads me to wonder, could this be part of a larger conspiracy? Multiple assassination attempts here in the capital, while Matalon's son betrays us to the rebels in the north."
"Why is it, Your Majesty, that when things go wrong, it's always somebody else's fault?" Ashe thought.
"Your Majesty," Matalon said, "I have provided unflagging support through 25 years of war. No one has contributed more troops or treasure to this effort. People are suffering and starving throughout the Empire. Now, it appears, I have sacrificed my eldest son. And for what? Control of a small realm infested with sorcerers and savages whose major exports are things we do not need? Enough is enough. I am done." "Are you saying that you will not submit to the command of your sovereign, anointed by God?" "I am saying that I am tired, and I want to go home and mourn with my lady wife, and see to my estates, which are sorely in need of attention."
The Thane inclined his head, then turned and strode toward the door, attended by his men-at-arms and his son.
"Go home if you like," Montaigne said, "but your lady wife is not there."
Matalon froze mid-stride, then turned to face the king.
"Explain yourself," he said.
Montaigne spoke to the entire hall.
"In view of events in Delphi, I have taken the precaution of sequestering the families of my Thane council members in keeps far from the northern border. That way, none of you will have worries about their safety, and all of you will be able to focus on winning this war."
At this, the Thanes around the table pushed to their feet, many of them with their hands on their swords. It was a vicious move, even for Montaigne.
"And yes," Montaigne said, "that includes the ladies who have just left the hall."
The doors in the dining room swung open, and blackbirds flooded into the room, most of them collared mages. They took up positions all around the perimeter.
"Do note that I don't expect you to carry the entire weight of this new effort. I have initiatives underway that should provide some relief from the demands of this war, in terms of levies of money and men. I just ask for a little forbearance."
If I killed the bastard now, Ashe thought, none of these lords would lift a finger to stop me. But then they'd turn around and execute me because, precedent. He'd have to wait a little longer. Since he'd met Jenna, it had become increasingly important to survive.
"Now," Montaigne said, "I would ask you to remain in your city houses until the end of the month. By then, I should have some good news for all of you. You may go, all except Lord Matalon, who will remain here as our guest during our inquiry."
By then, the Thane and his men-at-arms were nearly at the door. He turned to face the king.
"With all due respect, Your Majesty, I decline."
He turned, a blade in each hand, and cut the throats of the blackbirds nearest to him. His men formed a circle around their lord, prickling with swords. They drove a wedge through the king's guard and out the door. The banquet was, for all intents and purposes, over. The king hurried from the room, insulated by a crowd of guards, while Ashe accompanied the queen back to her quarters. Ashe's skin prickled with a growing unease. The fall of Delphi and a possible civil war might be good news for the Fells, but it would make Ashe's job that much harder. An embattled king would be harder to get at than before. Prisoners didn't usually fare well within a kingdom in chaos. And the rebellion of the Thanes would make a potential deal with the Empress of Carthus more appealing than ever. 34. The Emissary. When Ash arrived at the king's small hall for the meeting with Strangward, the room was already crowded. Pettyman, the king's steward, Jerome, his new taster, and far too many Blackbird mages were already on hand. The hall was a smaller, more intimate version of the throne room, adjacent to the king's privy chamber. Montaigne even had a throne of sorts, an elaborate chair on a raised dais, so he could look down on those around him. Pettyman knew how to find that sweet spot where hospitality and politics met. He'd refreshed the solstice greenery around the mantel and doorways, and laid a modest display of food and drink out on the sideboard. Jerome was in the process of tasting it under the watchful eyes of Fleury and Marc Desjardins. It was a waste of time. Ash knew by now that the king wouldn't touch it anyway. Montaigne had always been paranoid, but he'd grown worse after the assassination attempts. His personal guard searched his bedchamber each night before he locked the door. No morsel passed his lips without being trialed on the taster, multiple times. He constantly complained of headaches, tremors, and rashes, but refused Ash's offers of help. Could the king's symptoms be a signal that Ash's plan was working? He didn't know. It would help if he knew whether the king was using white magic, but he didn't want to draw attention to the living silver by asking about it. Ash and Jerome were spending lots of time together these days. Ash had become the equivalent of the king's magical taster, assigned to keep a constant eye out for magical threats, scrutinize visitors, and be ready to leap into action in the event of sudden illness or another attempt on the king's life. Ash would have been more than happy to allow any rival assassin to do the honors, but it hadn't happened yet. With the arrival of the emissary, he knew that time was running out, for Jenna anyway. A handful of people would be coming together with the Carthian delegation to decide Jenna's fate, like brokers at a slave auction. Ash took a deep breath, forced himself to unclench his fists, to loosen his muscles, to lean against the wall as if he had nothing to lose. He hadn't survived this long by being stupid. Speaking of the slave trade, Lila and Destin Carn arrived together, of course. Ash fingered the collar around his neck. Since the delivery of the crates of flashcraft, Ash's last illusions about Lila had disappeared. Lila would go anywhere and do whatever it took in order to make some coin. If she thought she was going to take him back to the Fells and collect the reward, she was in for disappointment. Now that Lila and Carn were experts on magical devices, they'd been called in to offer an opinion on the weapon Commander Strangward had brought. Or maybe the king was just lonely. General Carn was in the field, deploying his forces in the path of a possible attack by Arshal Matalon and his allies. Matalon was on his way to his fortress at White Oaks, calling in his bannermen along the way, getting ready for a fight. I wonder if my mother knows the consequences of her claiming of Delphi. Maybe that was the plan all along. It seemed like he was learning more about his mother at a distance than he ever had at home. While little Carn made plans with the blackbirds, Lila drifted over to where Ash stood. "You're not even tempted?" she asked, nodding at the spread along the wall, a blackbird standing guard at either end. "I just ate," Ash said, "and I don't care for herring." "You know what I mean." "No, I don't," Ash said, showing his teeth in a smile. "But help yourself if you're hungry. The king's not going to touch it, not after it's been sitting out." Apparently Lila wasn't hungry either, because she didn't chance it. The king arrived soon after that with Baudetort. The king was well turned out in black and silver, but he looked a bit under the weather. The skin on his cheeks appeared chapped, and he repeatedly rubbed his forearms as if they itched. His hands tremored a bit until he clasped them together on his lap. Ash bent his knee to the king, then rose, studying his face. "Are you well, your majesty?" "Never better," the king snapped. "Did you scan the room?" "I did, and found nothing suspicious," Ash said. Greenberry, the chamberlain, appeared at the door.
The Principia, Father Fosnot, is here with a delegation from the Northern Islands, Your Majesty, he said. Shall I show them in? By all means, Montaigne said. Let's get this done.
The first man through the door was massive, broad-shouldered, a mountain of a man. His hair was the color of burnt honey, braided and twisted into locks. He wore a loose linen shirt tucked into trousers, a baldric and belt over top. He wore his wealth on his wrists and around his neck, a random assortment of gold cuffs and chains and pendants. A light cape was thrown over all, and it seemed to change colors in the light from the torches. No weapons were in evidence. The delegation had been relieved of them outside. I wonder if the Empress is as impressive as her emissary, Ash thought, eyeing him. There were 6 of them in all, none of them wearing any kind of uniform. They were dressed in clothing in various colors, of a comfortable style similar to that worn by the emissary. Men and women dressed the same, resembling sailors more than anything else. Their one consistency was that all of them displayed wavelets of tattoos covering their arms. Ash guessed that must be the signia of the Empress. Most were fair-skinned, but colored by long hours in the sun, their hair ranging from a shade like bleached linen to corn silk to light brown. All of the men were clean-shaven. Some had longer hair drawn into thick side braids, while others were more closely shorn. Both the men and women wore more jewelry than was fashionable in Arden. Most wore earrings, other bangles, or elaborate belt buckles. What kind of people were they? Ash studied them closely, looking for clues. Fosnot's description of them as horse savages or pirates seemed to fit. Not encouraging. Carthian pirates had a ruthless reputation, and they would sail off with Jenna unless Ash could find a way to prevent it. When the group stood in front of the king, Fosnot cleared his throat to introduce them, but the Carthian emissary seemed oblivious to protocol. He stepped forward and said in common,
I am Tezavon bin Marala, sworn sword of Tarvos. May I present Lord Evan Strongward, emissary of the Empress Celestine, ruler of the Northern Islands, the desert coast, Carthis, Endru, and Anamea, and true source of Tarvos.
Standing aside, he gestured toward a young man who had been lost in the pack until then. That's the emissary, Lila murmured as if unimpressed.
Don't underestimate him, Ash said, eyes narrowed. They're all wizards of some sort, but I'm guessing that he's by far the most powerful of the lot.
Though clearly the Carthians were gifted, their auras seemed different from what Ash was used to. Western wizards glowed a cool bluish-white. Strangward's aura came closest to that. He lit up the entire room with a brilliant white glow. Each time he gripped his amulet, which was often, it was as if the lights dimmed. The other delegates glowed a faint red, like dying coals. Are they different kinds? Ash wondered. Or is it just that Strangward is more powerful than the others? The emissary wasn't as tall as Ash, but looked to be about the same age. He was wiry more than muscular, and of a more slender build. He wore a loose linen shirt under a close-fitting leather jerkin that buckled up the front. His roomy breeches were tucked into soft knee-high boots. His sword belt was cinched around his waist, the scabbard empty. He was less decorated than the others, save a gold earring in one ear and his amulet, boldly displayed on the outside of his clothing. The fact that his nose had been broken at least once saved him from being too pretty, with his glittering fair hair, feral green eyes, and finely planed face. "I'll bet he's someone the girls like to look at," Lila murmured. "I'll bet they do more than look," Ash thought. Ash had never been to the Northern Islands, and yet there was something familiar about the emissary's voice and features. Perhaps he'd met some wizard who was a throwback to an earlier time. Montaigne was studying the emissary with a faintly bemused expression, but whether it had to do with Strangward's youth or his manner of dress, Ash didn't know. Fosnot continued with the introductions.
"May I introduce His Majesty, Gerard Montaigne, by the grace of the Maker, King of Arden and Tamron, and ruler of the new empire of the 7 realms."
"Your Majesty." Strangward inclined his head enough to be polite, though probably not as much as protocol demanded in a meeting between an emissary and a king.
"It is a pleasure to meet you at last. We have looked forward to engaging with Arden, and with the rest of the 7 realms. This is such a pretty green place."
There was something hungry about the way he said it that raised the hair on the back of Ash's neck. The emissary spoke common well, though with an unfamiliar accent, which made sense since, as far as he knew, Ash had never met anyone from the Northern Islands.
"Welcome to Arden, Lord Strangward," Montaigne said. "I trust you had a fair weather crossing."
"Yes," Strangward said, lips twitching, as if at some private joke.
"I nearly always do."
Fosnot gestured toward the others.
"This is Lord Bodetort, Speaker of the Thane Council, and Lieutenant Destin Khan, who is with the King's Guard."
Strangward's gaze flicked over each person as they were named. Then he turned to look at Lila and Ash, who stood off to one side.
"You left out these 2, he said, pointing. "Those 2 are,
It was clear that Fosnot had no idea how to describe their role in this meeting. Destin Karn came to the rescue.
"This is Lila Barrowhill, an expert in weaponry and logistics. Adam Freeman is a member of our Royal Guild of Healers." "Do you anticipate that there will be a need for a healer?" the emissary asked, looking around as if to spot the afflicted. "Or do you always keep one standing by?" "Freeman is here to answer any questions that might come up about the health of the girl," Karn said.
The emissary cocked his head, studying Karn.
"You are a mage," he said, "aren't you?"
Karn seemed unusually skittish for some reason. He looked to the king for guidance, received none, then said,
"Yes, Lord Strangward, I am." "And so are you," Strangward said to Ash. "How curious." He turned back to Montaigne. "I had not expected to see mages made so welcome at court. You see, I had heard that you burn the gifted in Arden. I am so relieved to learn that I was misled." For a long moment, nobody had anything to say. Ash bit his lip to prevent amusement from crawling onto his face. Finally, Father Fosnot cleared his throat. "We are people of faith, Lord Strangward, and well aware of the dangers of demonic influence. In certain situations, in which certain mages violate the tenets of the Church, they are examined by the hand. If found to be corrupted, they are cleansed by the flame."
"Cleansed?" Strangward raised an eyebrow.
"Cleansed,"
Fosnot repeated. When Strangward kept looking at him as if puzzled, he snapped, "We burn them. And so then they are dead. But cleansed, and therefore saved." "Fascinating," Strangward said, rubbing his chin. Fosnot fondled the keys to the kingdom that hung at his belt.
"What religion do you practice in the Northern Islands, if I may ask?" "In the East, the Empress is the religion," Strangward said. "She is not one to share power, not even with the gods." He turned back to Ash. "Why is it that you and these guardsmen wear metal collars? Is it a mark of rank or personal fashion, or do you belong to a particular tribe that—" "That's enough!" Montaigne roared, having reached the end of his patience. "If you would like, emissary, we can assign one of our clerics to explain to you some of our customs."
he said testily.
My time is limited, however, and I would like to proceed to the main topic of this meeting. That is, an agreement between the Empress and ourselves.
He gestured to a grouping of chairs.
You may sit.
The emissary sat, thrusting his legs out in front of him, but his companions remained standing.
Forgive me, he said. Where I come from, it often takes several days of tea-drinking and storytelling to get down to business. I can see that your habits are different, and clearly much more efficient.
The emissary had an oddly formal and self-deprecating manner of speaking, and yet hidden in every line was a rather sharp point. Fosnot, Bodetort, and Karn sat as well. Lila and Ash remained standing, while Montaigne stayed where he was, on the dais, with his guard of blackbirds around him.
I appreciate your seeing me at what must be a busy time, given the events in the north,
Strangward said. Montaigne's eyes narrowed.
What events?
The loss of Delphi must have been a blow,
given its importance as a source of iron and steel. News travels fast, it seems, Montaigne said, pretending to straighten his cuffs. Bad news, especially. That's the way of the world, I'm afraid.
He's laying the groundwork for a better deal, Ash thought, with grudging admiration. You need us, is what he's saying.
Delphi is a miserable place to campaign in the winter, Bodetort said. We'll clear out the rebels when the weather warms.
Of course, Strangward nodded politely.
Unfortunately, the northerners do not seem to mind the cold, he sighed. So much trouble with the fells.
The words were delivered carelessly, but the smile had bite.
If the Witch Queen has captured Delphi, Montaigne said, she won't hold it for long. War is a constant series of advances and retreats. I agree, Strangward said. In that sense, warfare is like the course of true love. You've been knocking on this queen's door for a good long time, yet she will not open the gate.
Blood and bones, Ash thought. Strangward knows that my mother spurned Montaigne's offer of marriage a quarter-century ago. He's done his research, and he is not afraid to go for the throat. Poking the King of Arden is a dangerous game. But perhaps Strangward was dangerous too. There was something that lay beneath his calm and undecorated exterior, some elemental power that rippled the surface, like a serpent swimming in a quiet pond. Strangward bled confidence, as if he knew that, despite his almost frail appearance, he was the deadliest predator in the room. What would that mean for Jenna? If this is the emissary, what must the Empress be like?
Your point is?
Montaigne's voice penetrated the ear like slivers of ice.
My point is, perhaps we can help, move things along. We had specifically discussed an army, Montaigne said. While your personal guard is no doubt highly skilled, 6 soldiers will hardly suffice. The Empress worried that the sudden appearance of a foreign army would be poorly received in the absence of an agreement, Strangward said. Celestine will want to see the mage-marked girl before she makes that kind of commitment. If she is the one the Empress is seeking, make no mistake, the army will come.
Strangward leaned forward.
Now, you refer to her as a girl. How old is she? Perhaps 16 or 17, Karn said.
Ah, Strangward said, his face unreadable.
Is she gifted?
Karn shook his head.
No, at least, not in the usual way. Meaning? She is not a mage.
And then, as if realizing he should make a better pitch, added,
However, she may have other gifts that have not yet made themselves apparent.
Ash frowned. Karn was not his usual smooth self. His face gleamed with sweat, and he kept fingering his amulet and looking from the king to the emissary as if unsure who his audience was. The king shifted restlessly in his seat, looking more and more annoyed at Karn's clumsy attempts to make the sale.
Given that the Empress was the one who asked us to find the demon-marked girl, perhaps you should tell us why she is of value, Montaigne said.
Evan Strangward sat back in his chair, putting the tips of his fingers together.
The Empress does not share her motivations with me. She is, however, a collector of sorts, with an appetite for the arcane and the exotic.
He paused again, tilting his head so the light caught his golden earring.
Perhaps that's all it is.
Ash struggled to keep the revulsion off his face. Jenna was being discussed like she was a rare piece of art to be put on display.
You expect me to believe that your Empress is willing to trade an army for a tavern wench with a blemish? Before too much time passes, you will meet Celestine in person,
Strangward said, and to Ash's ears it sounded like a threat.
It is likely that all of your questions will be answered then. In the meantime, when may I see the girl? Why not now? Montaigne said.
He nodded to Greenberry.
Tell Fleury and Desjardins to fetch her.
35. Off to market. 2 servants, Therese and Nettie, came early to ready Jenna for market. They brought a made-to-measure dress in purple silk, shot through with silver and gold. They helped her into it, which was a good thing, because it fit like a dandy's breeches. At least the skirt flared enough that she could walk.
"Purple is a good colour for you," Therese said. "The gold matches your eyes, my lady," Nettie said.
Jenna didn't argue. She sat numbly while they fussed with her hair. It took them a long while, and they argued quite a bit. She guessed that they weren't top shelf when it came to chambermaids, but good enough for her. Her hair had been mostly undercover for the past 4 years, so she wasn't exactly up to the minute on style. In the end, they pinned it up on the top of her head like a princess in a fairy tale.
"I look like a solstice cake,"
Jenna complained when they were finished.
"Well," Therese said, "everybody likes solstice cakes."
Nettie couldn't figure out why Jenna wasn't more cheerful, since she was getting all dressed up.
"Look at this, my lady,"
she said, displaying a necklace of amethyst and pearls.
"Lovely, isn't it?"
When she went to fasten it around Jenna's neck, she sucked in her breath and fingered the mage mark on the back of her neck.
"That's lovely, too," she said. "It's like you've got a permanent brooch on."
That was one way to think of it. When they decided she was ready, an escort of blackbirds took her downstairs. She thought she was going to meet the emissary right then, but instead they took her to a tiny room on the main floor, not much more than a closet with a single bed and a washstand and mirror.
"This is the gentleman butler's quarters,"
Desjardins said, pausing in the doorway. He was the kindest of the king's blackbirds.
"It's right next to the king's suite. We'll come get you when it's time."
Jenna wondered where the gentleman butler was. There was scarcely room to pace, so it was good she'd brought a book along. She opened her book, but it was hard to concentrate. She didn't even know what to worry about, because she had no idea why an empress would put out a warrant on her.
"Flamecaster."
Jenna flinched and looked around. The room was as empty as before.
"I starve in the dark. Where are you?"
she whispered to the empty room. Nothing. Don't be a loon, Jenna thought, refocusing on the page. She'd been seeing visions all her life. Voices. That was new.
"Flamecaster, help me." "Shut up," she hissed.
Maybe that was a long-term effect of the poison. It made you lose your mind. The door to the room slammed open, and Jenna jumped. It was Desjardins and Fleury.
Who are you talking to? Fleury demanded, looking around.
Nobody, Jenna said. Fleury scowled, but he couldn't exactly argue the point. Desjardins bowed his head as if she were a lady, and he was her escort to a party.
It's time to go, my lady.
He leaned closer.
Take courage.
The room, as he'd said, was right next door. As soon as she walked in, she was smacked by a dozen sensations, the scent of food and greenery, sweat and salt water. Her heart stumbled when she spotted Adam against the wall in green velvet, his expression grim, his eyes like twin bruises. Next to him stood a young woman in a blue overdress and dark skirt, someone Jenna didn't know. Also Destin Carn, a crow of Malthus, a richly dressed thane, and the king. The king! She took a second look. The image was still there. In place of the king's head was a grinning skull. Her heart began to thump. What did it mean? Was it because the king was so often the agent of death? Or did it mean that Montaigne was not long for this world? She prayed with everything she had for the latter. She struggled to focus on the rest of the room. Facing off with the Ardennines were a half-dozen exotically dressed foreigners. All glowed as red as a toper's nose, except for one, a fair-haired mage with a cocky look and a blue-white aura. Carn ushered her forward, his sweaty hand between her shoulder blades.
This is Jenna Bandelow, he said, the girl with the mage mark.
Carn didn't bother to introduce anyone to Jenna, but the fair-haired mage walked toward her, smiling, hands extended, so she guessed he must be the emissary.
That's close enough,
Adam said, planting himself between them. Jenna hadn't even seen him coming. The stranger stopped an arm's length away, looking amused.
I thought you were the healer, he said to Adam. Are you the chaperone, too? I'm the king's expert on magical threats, Adam said. Creating them or preventing them? Both. You can look, but don't touch. Ah, Strangward said. Good to know the parameters.
He stepped past Adam until he stood face to face with Jenna, 2 scant feet away.
I am looking, healer, he called over his shoulder. Not touching.
He refocused on Jenna.
I'm Evan Strangward, emissary of Celestine, Empress in the East, he said.
Jenna said nothing, just stood, clutching her skirts to either side. Should she say she was pleased to meet him when she wasn't? Strangward nodded gravely, as if acknowledging a greeting from her.
I'm told you have a mage mark on the back of your neck. May I see it?
Feeling as trapped as a butterfly pinned to a board, Jenna looked around the circle of faces, at grim-faced Adam Wolfe, and sweating Destin Carn, the blackbirds with their weapons, the scruffily exotic Carthians, the king and the thane and the mages. Every eye was fixed on her. She remembered her conversation with poor Riley on the way to the mines years ago. She told him that her mage mark meant that she was powerful and destined for great things. She didn't feel powerful now. How did a coal miner from Delphi end up here? No, she said, swallowing hard, claiming the only power she could. The king motioned impatiently to his blackbirds, and as they moved toward her, the emissary said,
Please, Jenna.
Jenna looked up in surprise. There was something in Strangward's green eyes, something that might have been sympathy.
All right, she said, swallowing hard. As long as you say please.
She turned, bowing her head, so he could get a good look. She felt the burn of his scrutiny, the slow release of his breath in a sigh, as if this confirmed something. Was that good news or bad news?
Thank you,
he said, taking a half step back.
What have you been told about the mark?
She turned to look at him. "That I would be hunted and killed for it," she said. The emissary's lips tightened. "Anything else?" he persisted. "No." "Are there any other markings on you?" "A few scars is all," she said. She lifted her chin. "What does the Empress want with me?" "I don't know," Strangward said. Jenna studied him, trying and failing to conjure up an image. He wasn't exactly lying, but... "You're afraid of her, aren't you?" she said. "Anyone who is not afraid of the Empress Celestine is a fool," Strangward said. He turned back to the king. "I should like to interview the girl in private," he said. Jenna was afraid to look at Adam. She could scent his rage and frustration from across the room. "You can do that after the trade is made," Montaigne said. "If it is made. We still have not seen this weapon we've heard so much about." "Very well," the emissary said. "Let's go see it. Who is coming?" What was it about this girl that made her important? Lila still didn't know. True, she was striking, with her brilliant multi-hued hair and golden eyes, but her features were not classically beautiful. She'd not had a close look at the marking, but it likely wouldn't have helped anyway. Lila was no scholar after all, and even the scholars seemed stumped. From what everyone said, she had an unimpressive, random collection of gifts. So what explained this Empress's fixation on her? True, you could never tell what random person or thing a blue blood might obsess about. Or was this some kind of massive hoax? If it was, Lila couldn't see the point. She'd know more after seeing the Empress's weapon. Lila was among a hand-picked trio that boarded the emissary's sailing dinghy to travel out to the main ship for a look. Destin Karn, Bodetort, and Lila. She guessed Ash would have liked to come, but he was not invited, and the girl Jenna was returned to her cell. The King of Arden, of course, remained on shore with his guard. You could call us the Expendables, Lila thought. Strangward cast off the line and leapt aboard, while the big man, Teza Vaughn, raised the sail. They worked well together, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. This was the oddest team of diplomats that Lila had ever seen. The emissary touched his amulet, the sails filled, and off they went, even though they were traveling in the opposite direction than they had before. Destin was still jumpy as a cat. Finally, he found a spot on a bench and sat there, knee bouncing, gripping his jinx piece. "What's with you?" Lila thought. Bodetort stood at the rail, staring out at the waves. He showed no inclination to chat with a pirate, so Lila filled the void. "You seem to be a skilled sailor," Lila said, looking up at the taut sails. "I was raised on a ship," Strangward said, squinting his eyes against the spray. "You must have been a useful person to have around." Strangward laughed. "To some people, maybe. To others, not so much. Is this the first time the Empress has gone looking for someone with the mage mark? Or does she keep an entire stable of such people?" Strangward looked away. "No, she does not keep a stable of such people." Lila couldn't help thinking that the emissary's words were carefully chosen. Then again, he was an emissary. They were coming up alongside the vessel. The sails slackened, and Vaughn caught a line tossed down to them from above. A ladder followed, the iron rungs clanking against the side of the ship. Here in the main channel, the wind picked up, and the climb from the waterline to the lowest deck was terrifying. Bodetort especially seemed relieved to reach the deck. "This way." Vaughn and Strangward led the way aft, and Lila did her best to map out the layout of the ship in her mind. "How many crew does it take to sail her?" she asked. "With a good crew, 6 or 8's enough to handle her," Vaughn said.
If you need gunners, boarding parties, and galley staff, it'll be more. Here we are."
By now they'd reached amidships. They gathered around while Vaughn and Strangward unlatched a hatch and wrestled it open. Strangward peered into the opening, then nodded as if satisfied.
"It's down here," he said.
Grabbing up a lantern, he unrolled a rope ladder over the edge. Lila heard the plop as it hit bottom. When he went to climb down, Vaughn gripped his arm.
"My lord,"
he said in a low, worried voice.
"Please, let me go."
"Nonsense," Strangward said. "You'd likely get stuck in the hatch." When Vaughn didn't release him, he said,
"Let go, Vaughn. I'll be fine."
Vaughn let go, and the emissary disappeared down the ladder.
"Are you coming?"
Strangward called up, when he'd apparently reached the bottom. They looked at one another. Nobody seemed eager to be first. Lila peered over the edge into the hold. The emissary stood below, looking up at her, hands on hips. He'd set the lantern on a table, illuminating the entire space. And next to him, on the floor, lay a dragon.
"Blood of the martyrs,"
Lila breathed. Stepping over the edge of the hatch, she turned, gripped the ladder, and began to descend.
"This is the weapon we promised your king,"
Strangward said when Lila stood beside him.
"The most powerful predator of the natural world."
It was smaller than Lila would have expected a dragon to be, armored with jeweled scales that glittered in the lamplight. Its eyes shone brilliantly, set on either side of a handsome face. Eyes that seemed familiar, almost human. It had stubby horns on its head and wicked claws on all 4 feet. One wing was folded tightly against its back, while the other drooped like a tent with broken poles. It appeared to be torn in places. Lila studied the beast with mingled fascination and fear. Razor-sharp spines marched down its back all the way to the end of its tail. Its tail was coiled around it, occupying most of the floor space. Flame trickled from its nostrils. It wore a heavy collar around its neck, engraved with runes. It was connected to a heavy chain bolted into the wall. It looked up at Lila with a spark of interest, then seemed to dismiss her, and rested its head on its claws again. The space was entirely lined with brick and tile, which was blackened in spots, like the lining of a malfunctioning furnace. A pile of half-eaten rabbit carcasses lay in one corner, and the entire hold smelled of rum and sick and rotten meat. Bodetort was the next down the ladder, followed closely by Destin. When the Thane spotted the dragon, he took a quick step back and gripped the hilt of his sword.
Is that what I think it is?"
"That depends on what you think it is," Strangward said. Lila couldn't help liking the emissary's style. Whether she'd keep liking him remained to be seen. Destin stared at the beast with disbelief.
That's a Carthian sun dragon,"
he said, shooting a look at Strangward.
"Isn't it?"
Strangward nodded.
"But it is my understanding that dragons are not real," Bodetort said.
Strangward looked from the dragon to Bodetort.
"I assure you, this dragon is absolutely real. Touch it if you like."
Bodetort made no move to do so.
"It smells vile down here," he said, "like a piss-pot in a bawdy house. Do dragons always stink like that?" "We were anchored crossways in the current, and I think it's a little seasick," Strangward said. "It's been closed up down here since we sailed." Bodetort nudged a washtub with his foot. "It smells like rum. Is that what it drinks?"
"Rum keeps it calm," Strangward said. "It seems to like it."
"I suppose that would put a fire in its belly," Bodetort said. "Do dragons really breathe flame, like the legends say?"
Strangward rocked his hand.
Sometimes.
Lila squatted in front of the dragon. Its eyes were glazed, its breath coming fast.
I wouldn't get too close, Strangward said sharply.
It's not trained.
This one is not quite training size, Strangward said. But once you begin, they catch on quickly.
Lila looked from Strangward to the dragon. This emissary is more nervous than he lets on. It's like he's not entirely sure what this dragon might do. Is it because it's a young dragon and untrained? Or are they always that unpredictable?
How old is it? Destin asked.
I'd say 6 months to a year. I don't know for sure, since it was captured in the wild. But they grow fast. It's nearly doubled in size since we sailed. We had to bring a young one. It would be impossible to transport a full-grown dragon.
Why? How large can they get?
Double the length of this ship.
Truly? They get that big?
Botatort's eyes gleamed. Before long, this dragon will be too big to get through the hatch, Lila thought. Even now it would be tight. Is it a male or female? She asked.
I don't know,
Strangward said.
Dragons are like some people. It's difficult to tell without close examination.
How long has it been locked in the hold?
Destin asked. Shouldn't it get some fresh air? The ship is made of wood, Lieutenant. Would you give a dragon the run of a wooden ship?
Strangward patted the tile wall with the flat of his hand.
If our deal goes forward, it will have plenty of room to roam here in the wetlands.
I'm trying to imagine how dragons could be used in warfare,
Botatort said, rubbing his chin.
Here's an example, Strangward said. One problem you have in fighting the northern forces is that the mountains are a formidable barrier. Another problem is the distance you must travel to get to the enemy. A full-grown dragon could fly over the mountains, destroy a city, and be back in Arden's court in time for supper. It would no longer be necessary for you to send your soldiers north year after year.
The Thane looked from the dragon to Strangward.
You have seen this with your own eyes?
Where I come from, the sight of a dragon will send any army fleeing for their lives, Strangward said.
He turned toward the ladder.
It's crowded down here. If everyone's had a look, perhaps we could continue this conversation back on shore.
He hurried all of them back up on deck. Vaughn seemed visibly relieved when Strangward emerged from the hold. Back in the palace, they reassembled in the presence chamber so that they could make their reports to the king. Lila noticed that Ash lurked nearby. When he heard about the dragon, he abandoned all pretense and moved in closer.
Have you used them for reconnaissance work?
Montaigne asked Strangward.
They can see long distances, and in the dark, so even the young ones would be suitable for that sort of thing, Strangward said.
Can they understand orders? The king asked. Can they tell the difference between enemies and allies?
Dragons are the most intelligent creatures I have ever encountered, Strangward said. They are much brighter than most people I meet.
He smiled a feral smile.
I have no doubt that they could make that distinction.
Lila thought of the collar the dragon wore in the hold. It faintly resembled the flashcraft collars used here in the south. Can dragons be controlled using collars, in the way that mages can?
With dragons, Strangward said, it's more a matter of knowing how to train them.
Something about the way he said it reminded Lila of a barker at the fair. Maybe the king thought so too, because he motioned to Destin.
Lieutenant, he said, can you verify the truth of what the emissary is saying?
Destin licked his lips.
Your Majesty, he said, as a diplomat, Commander Strangward is protected by a certain— No worries, Lieutenant, Strangward broke in. Truly, I don't mind.
Smiling, he extended his hands toward the spymaster. Destin took a breath, released it, then took hold of the emissary's hands. He looked straight into the diplomat's face.
"Are you telling the truth, Commander Strangward?" "Always, Lieutenant Karn," Strangward said. "Or at least as often as possible." "Do you mean harm to the king or the Empire?" "No," Strangward said. "Is this dragon as powerful as you say it is?" Destin whispered. "If anything, I have underestimated its potential."
"Can they carry soldiers or supplies?" Boditort asked.
"I've not seen that," Strangward said, "but they are certainly strong enough. I suppose you would need some sort of harness or a saddle."
Boditort turned to Lila.
"Would you be able to procure something suitable? Clan-made, perhaps? Something that combines the control of a collar with the practicality of a saddle?"
"I could look into it," Lila said reluctantly, "though, since my sources have no experience with dragons, I imagine that it would take time to work up a design." Destin turned to the king.
"Was there anything else you wanted me to ask, Your Majesty?"
"No, Lieutenant," Montaigne said. "I am satisfied."
Destin held on to Strangward's hands a moment longer, then released his hold and stepped back. But Lila wasn't done. She took a quick breath, knowing she had to tread lightly. "I am concerned about the health of the dragon we saw today," she said. "It seemed listless." Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Ash sit up straighter.
"Dragons eat large meals, and then sleep for long periods in between," Strangward said. "The dragon you saw made a fresh kill immediately before we sailed. He will get progressively more lively."
"What do dragons typically prey on?" Lila asked.
"They are meat-eaters, so they'll eat pretty much anything large enough to catch their interest."
"Including people?" she persisted.
"They have been known to eat people, yes," Strangward said.
"Would you be able to supply more dragons if we needed them?"
Boditort asked. "I know where to find large numbers of dragons," Strangward said. "More than you'll ever need."
There were nods all around. This is too easy, Lila thought. Strangward must have sensed that too, because now he moved to close the deal.
"So, here's what I propose. We will leave the dragon with you and take the girl back to the northern islands with us. If the Empress determines that she is the girl she is looking for, our armies will arrive in time for the marching season in the north. If you find the dragon to be useful, we can make arrangements to supply more."
Montaigne shook his head.
"I'm sorry. That is not acceptable to us."
Strangward went perfectly still.
"It's not acceptable? In what way, Your Majesty?"
"We were promised an army for the girl," Montaigne said, "and we do not intend to give her up until we get one. We've given you the opportunity to examine the girl and determine if she is the one you are looking for. If you believe she is, inform the Empress and return with the army, and we will make the trade. If you are interested in establishing trade in dragons, I suggest that you leave the dragon here so that we can evaluate its potential usefulness to us."
Strangward gazed at the king for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had an edge to it.
"So, the dragon and the diamonds stay with you, and we leave empty-handed. That hardly seems fair." "You've learned a lesson, then? One you should have mastered long before now," Montaigne said. "Life isn't fair." "I'll make a note of that, Your Majesty," Strangward said, his jaw tight. "I am certain this lesson will be of great use to me going forward. In truth, I have little interest in establishing a trade in dragons. I'll report your requirements to Celestine, and we will see what she decides.
He inclined his head slightly.
Gentlemen and lady, thank you for your time.
With that, the delegation from the Empress in the East walked out, leaving behind their last vestige of protocol.
Arrogant savage,
Montaigne said. Lila glanced at Ash. His eyes were closed, his face slack with relief. Lila frowned. Was he relieved that Arden would not have a dragon at its disposal? Wasn't a dragon preferable to an army? Or was he just happy with the delay?
Your Majesty, Boditort protested. A girl for a dragon. It seems to me that there is little risk to us in such an agreement. The Empire is swarming with women, but with a dragon we could fly all the way to Fellsmarch and burn the wolf bitch to a crisp.
Clearly, Boditort envisioned himself as just the hero to do that.
I have examined the girl, Destin said, and I have not been able to identify any qualities that would match the value of a— Enough! Montaigne stood, trembling with rage. I have made my decision. We may not see the girl as valuable, but the Empress clearly does, and that is all that matters. I will not allow a shipload of unwashed pirates to conduct a bait-and-switch. When the Empress sends me an army, we will do business, and not before.
36. Strange bedfellows. When Ash left the royal apartments, he headed straight for the stables. Though he was officially working full-time in the healing halls, he found that sometimes hard physical labor was the only treatment for the anger and frustration that accumulated at court. And right now he needed that sort of relief. Grabbing up a pitchfork, he proceeded to pitch dirty hay out of the nearest stall and into the aisle, not particularly careful about where it landed. He mucked out a half-dozen stalls until the muscles in his shoulders and arms burned, and he was soaked in sweat. All the while his mind boiled like a mud spring. What could the Empress of a faraway island realm possibly want with Jenna? All of the possibilities seemed bad. Besides, any Ardenine alliance with a realm known for powerful magic spelled bad news for the Fells. "I thought you were out of the stables," someone said behind him. Ash knew without turning around that it was Lila.
Every now and then, I get in the mood to shovel horse shit. You're welcome to help.
"We need to talk."
No, you want to talk. There's a difference.
This agreement, can't go forward."
"Maybe it won't,"
Ash said, digging into the dirty hay.
"You heard the king. Maybe he and the Empress will never come to terms, which is fine by me."
"I think they will eventually, unless something happens to stop it." Ash finally turned around to face her, leaning on his pitchfork.
"What do you care? There's money to be made either way. Dragon harnesses, specialized clothing for dragon riders, dog collars for Kothian mages. The possibilities are endless."
"The last thing we need is another army mixing in," Lila said. "The situation is bad enough as it is."
"We? I don't know whose side you're on, but I'm pretty sure it's not mine. How do you think all those collars, talismans, and amulets are going to be used?" Ash's voice rose. "I'm not interested in getting involved with any of your schemes."
"Shh," Lila said, looking around. "I don't think you want to share that with the entire stable yard."
"We're done here anyway," Ash said, resuming his forking. "Now why don't you just go about your business and I'll go about mine? That was our agreement, remember?"
"You're wrong about me," Lila said. "I've not been straight with you, and that's why we need to talk. Someplace we won't be overheard." Something about the way Lila said this caught Ash's ear and made him turn around again. She looked and sounded serious as plague. It was like the smooth-talking, hard-drinking, unscrupulous slacker he knew had been swapped out for somebody else.
"All right," he said. "We can go into the tack room. Nobody will be in there this time of day. But I'm warning you, You'd better not be wasting my time.
As Ash had expected, the tack room was deserted. Raleigh would be at dinner, and it was too dark to be out riding this late at night at this time of year. Ash hung the lantern from one of the saddle racks and sat down on a trunk, arms folded, prepared for smoke and mirrors. Lila settled onto the bench that centered the room, raked her hand through her cap of curls, and squared her shoulders. "First off," she said, "my name is not Lila Barrowhill. It's Lila Byrne. Eamon Byrne is my father." As usual, Lila's first move set Ash reeling, like he'd been clubbed over the head. He didn't know what he expected, but it wasn't that. Eamon Byrne was the captain of the Queen's Grey Wolf Guard. The Queen of the Fells, that is, his mother. "Close your mouth, Sulhan," Lila said, sounding more like herself. "You look like a beached fish." He scrambled for something to say.
"I know Byrne's a widower, but I don't recall any children except for Simon."
"Simon was the oldest, then my brother Silva," Lila said. "My mother died in childbirth with me. Simon stayed on with our Da, and me and Silva went to live with my mother's relatives in the Southern Islands." When Ash took a closer look, he could see that it was possible. Captain Byrne's wife had been a Southern Islander, with dark skin and curly hair. Lila had inherited that, but her eyes were gray like her father's. Ash had guessed she was a mixed blood, but it had never occurred to him that it was this particular mix. "I guess you could say that this apple fell pretty far from the tree," Lila said with a crooked smile. "I never saw much of my Da until I went to live with some cousins in Baston Bay when I was 10. They were smugglers, though they called themselves traders, and they had ships that ran up and down the coast. My Da would visit my Aunt Lydia in Chalk Cliffs sometimes, and I'd take a ship up and see him. Not often. I was kind of mad at him, to tell you the truth."
"How come you were mad at him?"
"My mother was dead, and he was busy saving the queendom, so he never paid too much attention to me until Simon died. Then he couldn't figure out how to fit a square peg like me into the plan."
"What do you mean?"
"I was like this massive joke played on my father. I'm not good with stupid military rules, and I had no head for schooling. The things I was good at, like smuggling and role-playing and sailing and deal-making, he had no use for. Still, one thing you can say about Captain Byrne, he is persistent. He just kept calling in his markers, sending me back to Odin's Ford, trying to hone this bit of bad metal into a sword. I was damned tired of it." Much as Ash hated to admit it, his and Lila's lives had parallels. They'd been war orphans from the start. "Then you ran off to Odin's Ford. Well, at first they thought you were dead or captured, but your friend Taliesin ratted you out."
"Taliesin told them?"
Just one more club to the head. "You think you know a person, right? She wanted your mother to know you were still alive, but she talked her into letting you stay at Odin's Ford."
"So the Queen knew I was there all along?"
A couple of minutes into this conversation, and Ash already felt beat up. Questions swirled through his mind.
Why didn't she ever reach out to me or drag me home?"
"The Queen doesn't confide in me," Lila said, "but I think she was worried that any contact with you might put you at risk. Ardenine spies are everywhere." She glanced around again, as if to make sure none had slipped into the room. "Except for a few key people, everyone in the Fells thinks you're dead."
Does my sister know?"
"I don't know," Lila said. "She was pretty young, wasn't she, when you ran off?" When he ran off. That's exactly what he did.
"Yes," he said, "she was."
By then, Captain Byrne was beginning to realize that I could actually be useful. Maybe my name will never be up on the brag board in Wean House, but Odin's Ford is a great place to chat up assholes like Turant. Being a smuggler is great cover for traveling around the realms.
You were a spy?
Among other things, Lila said vaguely. My da asked me to keep an eye on you, from a distance, since following you around would just draw attention to you. I wasn't hot for the job. The last thing I wanted to do was nanny a runaway princeling. If King Gerard found out where you were, it wouldn't do any good anyway, and I'd get the blame. Her gaze was frank and unblinking. I finally agreed, but I negotiated summers off to do my own thing. It turns out I worried for nothing. Watching over you was an easy job until, this year. After the death crows came, I decided I'd better take you home, but you didn't cooperate. Good thing you didn't know what I did with my summers, Ash thought.
What are you doing here? Still nannying?
She shook her head. I've been working on a long-term project with a friend of mine. We're becoming major suppliers for the Ardenine army.
That seems to be going well, Ash said dryly.
He rose and paced back and forth.
So you sold them a boatload of flashcraft. You don't think that was going a little overboard when it comes to winning their trust?
It would be, Lila said, if the flashcraft worked as intended. Ash swiveled to face her.
Why? What's wrong with it?
Let's just say that it was custom work.
But I thought you said it was old flash.
My friend Rogan is a Rum clan flashcrafter. He is very good at reproductions.
All along, then, you've been working for the Fells?
Lila nodded.
Why didn't you tell me that before? I would have been at least marginally more polite.
To be honest, I thought of you as an amateur, a spoiled, entitled runaway princeling bent on revenge who would get caught and then complicate and compromise my elegant scheme. I figured the less you knew, the better.
I hate it when you sugarcoat things, Ash said. If you had access to the court, why cook up an elegant scheme? Why not just assassinate Montaigne?
Damn! Why didn't I think of that?
Lila slapped her forehead.
I'm serious.
What makes you think I haven't tried?
That wasn't you with the Geddon weed and the... No.
Lila rolled her eyes. The thing is, I never inherited the burn gene for martyrdom. I enjoy life too much to want to spend it on gutter-swiving Montaigne. How do I know Prince Jarrett will be an improvement? From what I've seen and heard, he probably won't be.
At least maybe he won't be hell-bent on murdering my family, Ash growled. So, why did you suddenly decide it was time to have a heart-to-heart with me?
Because an alliance between the Northern Islands and Arden will dilute the effect of the project Rogan and I have been working on for 3 years, and because the loss of your father as High Wizard makes us more vulnerable to magical attack than before. Lord Bayard has stepped in, but...
Bayard is High Wizard? Really?
Micah Bayard and his father had been rivals, if not outright enemies, for years. Whether intended or not, the grudge had been passed along to Ash. You really need to get out more, Sulhan, Lila said, looking amused. Ash had been in a bad mood since the meeting with Montaigne, and being blindsided like this didn't improve things.
So stop it. Kill the king. Kill the emissary. Launch an invasion of the Northern Islands. There are so many options.
The thing is, I need your help. What could a spoiled, entitled, runaway princeling possibly do for you? Ash thought it, but he didn't say it out loud, because then he would sound like one.
What kind of help?
You're not going to like it, Lila said, shifting her eyes away.
That doesn't surprise me. Go on.
The simplest way to prevent the deal from going forward is to eliminate the girl.
As in kill the girl?
Yes. Lila had the grace to look sheepish.
And you want me to do it?
You still have access to her, right? You're likely the only person who could do it, and get away with it. She leaned forward, speaking fast and persuasively. Look at it this way, healer. If not for you, she'd be dead. So in a way, you're just undoing what you did.
Breaking what I fixed.
Exactly, Lila said, looking proud that she'd come up with that. You can find a way to justify anything, can't you?
Look, it's the only way to kill the deal without giving everything away.
Without giving your scheme away, you mean?
Well, yes, Lila said. Plus, we survive. It's all good.
For everyone but Jenna.
Do you think it's better to send her off to the Northern Islands? Have you heard the expression, fate worse than death?
You need to get out of the habit of thinking of me as stupid, Ash said. I'm not going to help you kill Jenna, and it's not because I'm naive.
If I went to her and I told her what the stakes are, what do you think she would say?
That was when Lila crossed the line. In a heartbeat, Ash had her pinned up against the wall. She tried some cagey moves, but got nowhere. You will not go near her. Do you understand?
Lila stared at him, an incredulous look on her face. Blood and bones. How could I have missed that? You're not stupid. You're in love.
Just because I won't sign on to whatever plan you come up with doesn't mean I
can't believe it, Lila crowed. He has a heart after all.
You're not improving your chances of winning me over, Ash said. Just so you know, if you want my help, you're going to have to come up with a different plan.
37. A Pledge and a Promise. When Ash arrived at the tower room that night, the posted guard had been doubled. Whether because of Jenna's demonstrated market value or mistrust of the pirates, it was getting more and more difficult to get in to see her. Just another sign that time was running out. When he finally gained entry, she was sitting, looking out the window, a book lying forgotten in her lap. She'd changed out of the dress she'd worn to the interview with Strangward and into the one she'd worn the day before. She'd pulled her hair free, too, and it hung softly around her shoulders. When she turned and saw him, she launched out of the chair, the book thunking onto the floor. They came together like two magnets slamming home. Ash could feel Jenna's wildly beating heart through his velvet and her silk. It was like kisses were oxygen and they'd been drowning, or they were about to drown. Finally, she broke away and held him out at arm's length so she could look him over.
"What's that?"
she asked, pointing to the bottle he carried.
"It's wine," he said, "to celebrate some good news."
He set the wine jar and 2 cups down on the table next to her chair.
"So," she said, "what's the news? Wait, don't tell me. The king is dead."
There was something in her voice that caught his attention, some private knowledge or intuition. He hadn't told her about his attempts to poison Montaigne. He didn't want to get her hopes up, and she'd told him not to make promises after all. He studied her a moment, then said, "Not yet. We're celebrating for 2 reasons. First, Arden and Carthus were unable to come to terms. Montaigne is demanding his army before he hands you over. That buys us a little time."
"I'll drink to that," Jenna said, pouring them each some wine.
"It might just be a temporary setback," Ash warned.
"Remember my rule? Savor the moment."
She raised her glass and they toasted.
"Secondly, have you heard that Delphi has fallen?"
Jenna was swallowing down some wine, and she all but choked on it.
Fallen? To who?"
"The Patriots have retaken the city. They've booted the mudbacks out."
Jenna set down her wine, gripped his elbows, and danced him around the room in a kind of impromptu upland reel, her bare feet thumping on the stone floor.
"Come on, Wolf,"
she said when his feet didn't move fast enough.
"Put the wine down and dance with me."
Ash did his best, and finally they collapsed into the chair, gasping and laughing.
"Say it again," she said fiercely. "I want to hear it again."
"The Patriots have retaken Delphi," Ash said. "They've dealt the Ardenine army a crushing defeat."
"Oh," she said, smiling.
"I'll bet the bonfires are still burning on the hills. I wish I could be there to see it. Fletcher must be in a world of joy."
Gradually her smile faded, and the melancholy crept back into her eyes.
"There are so many people who didn't live to see it. Maggie and Riley and my da."
He cupped her face with his hands.
"Remember what you said, that worrying about the bad times can ruin what should be the good times. So celebrate without regret."
He kissed her, then poured them each another cup of wine.
"To the patriots of Delphi, both the living and the dead,"
Jenna said, raising her cup in a toast. She drank deeply, then stared into space, turning the cup in her hands.
"There it is again," she murmured.
"There's what?"
"Flamecaster. I keep hearing that name in my head."
"What do you mean?"
"Ever since that emissary arrived, I've been hearing voices. It sounds like someone crying for help, saying, 'Flamecaster, help me.'"
"Flamecaster?" Ash frowned. "Wasn't that your street name in Delphi?"
Jenna nodded.
"I picked it because I was always setting fire to things and blowing things up."
"Is that new? The voices?"
She nodded. "It's always been images before."
"Could it have something to do with the fighting in Delphi? Maybe your gift is letting you know about somebody in trouble."
She shrugged.
"Or I'm losing my mind. Anyway, tell me about the emissary's weapon."
Ash took a fortifying gulp of wine.
"I didn't actually see it myself, but I'm told that it's a dragon."
"A dragon?"
Jenna's voice rose.
"But there's no such thing?"
She said this in the form of a question, as if she were no longer sure what was real and what was fantasy.
"That's what I thought too," Ash said. "But Lord Boditort saw it. He was all excited about it, in fact, and he has the imagination of a slug."
"How big was it?"
"They said that it was the size of a horse, but, you know, built differently. Strangward said it was young and not fully grown, that a fully grown dragon would be too big to transport by ship."
He paused.
"It's being kept in the hold, and Lila said that it looked like it was sick."
"It was sick?"
Planting her feet on the floor, she leaned forward, her hands on her knees.
"What do you mean? What was wrong with it?"
"I'm just going by what Lila said. She said it was listless. Strangward said that it was fine, that it always sleeps a lot when it's had a large meal."
Jenna pressed the heels of her hands against her temples, as if her head was in danger of splitting apart. She seemed to be getting more and more agitated as the conversation went on.
"Are you all right?" Ash said. "What's the matter?"
"I don't know," Jenna whispered, fingering the mage mark on the back of her neck. "It just seems like there's something about dragons. Something I should remember. Something that's burned into my bones." Her eyes were glazed, her breathing quick and shallow, and Ash guessed that images were flying through her mind. He waited until her eyes refocused a bit, then said,
"Could you have foreseen that the Empress meant to trade a dragon for you? Is that why it's familiar?"
She shook her head. "I don't know. Anyway, what does the king want with the dragon?"
"What he really wants is an army of mages," Ash said. "That's what the Empress promised. Strangward is trying to persuade the king to accept a dragon as a kind of down payment or deposit so he can take you back with him. He claims that dragons could be useful in the war, to carry soldiers and incinerate cities, that sort of thing."
It was an effort to keep his voice matter-of-fact.
"Boditort was convinced anyway. He was practically salivating, asking if he could have more than one."
"What did Lieutenant Khan have to say about the dragon? Did he see it?"
Ash nodded.
"He saw it. He didn't say much either way." He paused. "What did you think of Strangward?"
"He's such a mingle and a mix. He's hard to read. My gut tells me he's dangerous. He's scared, And he's telling a big, big lie.
I don't believe him either, Ash said, but he brought a big sack full of diamonds to prove he was in earnest.
She rubbed her chin.
I wish I could get my hands on him.
What?
Ash's stomach clenched. She grinned at him.
Easy there, Wolf. Sometimes I have to touch a person to get a reading. She paused. So, what do you think? Is this going to happen?
Ash shrugged unhappily.
He's gone to a lot of time and trouble to get to this point. The Empress must really want this deal.
There's a solution, Jenna said. What if I died before the exchange is made?
What? No!
Ash felt a twinge of guilt, recalling his conversation with Lila.
That is not a solution.
Think about it, Jenna said. The only thing worse than the king we have now is a king with a dragon and a whole new army.
No one is asking you to.
You don't need to ask. I'm volunteering, Jenna said. Thousands of patriots have died, fighting for freedom. It's a chance to do my part.
Her voice trembled a bit. Ash cast about for options.
What if the dragon dies instead? Then Strangwald has nothing to trade.
No, Jenna said, lifting her chin.
I don't like it either, but when it comes to a choice between...
Look, Jenna said, if the dragon dies, it just delays things. The Empress can always ship over another one. Besides, from what you said, Montaigne is really looking for an army. What we need to do is prevent Montaigne from forming an alliance with this Empress, whoever she is.
A delay would help, Ash said. With a little time, the king could die, or you might escape.
That's a prayer or a wish, she said. It's not a plan.
Give me another suggestion, Ash said. Something a little more creative than self-sacrifice.
She studied on it a while, and then her eyes lit up.
You said that the emissary's ship is here, in the harbor.
Ash nodded.
What if we blow it up and put the blame on Arden?
We?
Ash raised an eyebrow. He reached up and tapped his collar.
And this would happen how? I'm out of commission when it comes to attack magic, remember?
Jenna rolled her eyes.
It's not all about you, healer. I'm no wizard, and I've been blowing things up for years. I can tell you what you'll need and how to do it. You probably wouldn't want to use magery anyway, if we want to blame it on Arden.
Yes, Ash thought, I am in love with this girl. He heard Talison's voice in his head.
It's the worst thing in the world to risk yourself by loving someone. At the same time, it's the best thing in the world and worth the risk.
Jenna's mind was elsewhere.
Do you know someone who can get black powder, fuses, and the like?
Ash nodded, thinking of Lila.
I do.
I'll make a list then, but you have to promise me something.
Promise you what?
You'll free the dragon if you can.
Ash pressed his lips together to prevent words from spilling out, but Jenna saw.
You're wondering why I have this fixation on a dragon I've never met.
The thought did occur to me,
Ash said carefully.
The dragon didn't volunteer, Jenna said. Anyway, I can't help feeling that it's going to be important going forward.
She looked up at him.
Can you trust me on that? I'm not asking for a contract. All I'm asking is that you try.
Ash swallowed hard.
I'll do what I can.
He paused.
Have you thought about what might happen to you if the deal falls through? It's not like the king is going to set you free.
Jenna shrugged.
I'm from Delphi. I should have been dead a long time ago.
Some things are worse than death, Ash said.
Then give me an out.
She held out her hand and wiggled her fingers.
That again? No, healer. This is different. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to hear the bells in the temple church in Delphi ringing out the victory. I want to hike into the spirit mountains and speak to witches and fairies. I want to sail over the ocean, all the way to the horizon and beyond. I want to go all those places I've never seen, except in books. I want to fly. He raised both hands.
All right, he said. But remember, I
want more of this.
She pulled his head down and kissed him soundly on the lips.
And this.
Sliding her hands under his doublet, under his shirt, finding the bare skin, she lay back in the chair and pulled him down on top of her, wrapping her legs around him.
I have plans for you, Wolf,
she growled, biting at his ear.
I don't intend to die any time soon.
I believe you,
he said hoarsely. An hour later, by the temple bells, they still lay tangled together in the chair, their clothing in definite disarray. There is a lot can be done in a chair, Ash thought. Maybe we can just live in this chair from now on.
I'd better go,
he mumbled against her shoulder. Jenna yawned and snuggled in closer.
This is scandalous, you know, that we've spent so much unchaperoned time together.
Are you complaining?
No,
she exclaimed with such fervor that he laughed. It's just, in Bruin Swallow, I think we'd be considered married, and I still don't know your real name. Ash searched her eyes, brushing her lips with his fingertips.
Do you really want to know? Because I'll tell you.
She returned his gaze for a long moment, then shook her head.
It can keep. I rather like Adam, Wolf. When this is all over, you can take me to meet your mother.
I'll do that,
he said, realizing that he wanted them to meet. She grimaced. She'll probably hate me.
You're wrong, Ash said. She'll probably like you more than me.
He took her face between his hands and kissed her nose and her eyelids, then gently freed himself, straightened his clothing, and buttoned up. She wrapped up in a quilt, found paper and a quill, and wrote him a list, then told him exactly what to do with the items on it. Ash slid his finger under his silver collar and brought out a tiny packet made of cloth. He held it up for her inspection.
This contains 2 berries, known as baneberry. A single berry will kill you within minutes.
She stared at it.
You've had this all along?
You never know when you might face the sudden need to die, he said. Or for someone else to die.
Jenna eyed the packet.
Is it painful?
Would I choose something painful? Ash snorted. I'm told it's quite pleasant.
He showed her the cords attached to the packet.
This ties in place inside your clothing. Any questions?
She was looking at him, head tilted, questions crowding into her eyes.
More secrets, healer?
He shrugged.
We are trading secrets, I believe. Just remember to take it with you if you change clothes.
I'll remember,
Jenna said. She dug into the little bag and extracted one of the berries.
Keep this,
she said, holding it out to him.
I only need one.
I have plenty, he said.
They kissed, and kissed again. Finally, she broke away and said,
I have something for you too.
She crossed to the bed, reached under the straw ticking, and retrieved something. She took his hand and dropped it into his palm, closing his fingers over it. He opened his hand and looked at it, poking at it with his other hand. It was a pendant on a chain, both corroded by the passage of time.
What is this?
He said.
It was my father's, she said. It's all I have of his.
Jenna,
he said, his voice thick.
You can't give me this. Why are you...
I want you to have this, for luck, she said.
When he shook his head, she said,
I want to give it to you. If I keep it, sooner or later they'll take it away.
But what about you?
Adam said.
What will you do for luck?"
"I have you, Healer," she said. "That's all I need. You can give it back to me when I see you again. Now, kiss me again, and go."
So Ash did. Pausing in the doorway, he said, "See you soon."
"Thank you, Healer,"
she called after him. He looked back at her, and she was sitting cross-legged in the chair, hands resting on her lap, palms up. There was something in her eyes that sent a shiver of apprehension through him. It was hope. 38. On the waterfront. Ash was already sorry he'd brought Lila along. She'd been raising objections and complaints ever since he'd shared the new plan.
"Couldn't you have picked a less miserable night?"
Lila grumbled as they navigated the twisting streets of the harbor district of Ardenskourt. She swiped rain from her face with her sleeve and hunched her shoulders.
"I don't know how much time we have," Ash said. "Strangward could decide to sail with the morning tide."
"Strangward seems to be tight with the weather gods. Maybe he knows we're coming, and he ordered this up special."
The hair prickled on the back of Ash's neck. No. How would he know?
"Do you really think the Empress will blame this on Arden?"
"It seems plausible, doesn't it? Arden sinks their ship and steals their dragon, so they don't have to come to terms."
"That doesn't work if what you really want is an army,"
Lila pointed out.
"You don't have to come with me," Ash said. "I only brought you along because you're good with a knife, and got us the uniforms, and the explosives."
Lila snorted.
"Sorry I'm not pulling my weight."
"This may not be your idea," Ash said doggedly, "but it's what we're going to do."
"Is it? Are you really going to start playing the prince card after all?"
"Don't start in about my mother the queen, because I don't want to hear it."
"All right then, as your peer and absolute equal, I can't help thinking this is a really bad idea."
Thunder crashed and Lila flinched.
"Will this stuff even work when it's wet?"
She patted her backpack.
"Jenna says it will."
"How did she get to be such an expert on explosives?"
"She worked in the mines."
"At least tell me you've changed your mind about the dragon."
"I made a promise," Ash said.
"So break it. You break promises to me all the time." "Maybe the dragon could help us in the war. And maybe we could set fire to Fellsmarch and hope it spreads south."
3 more strides, and she said,
"I say, bring back the old hard-hearted Ash."
When Ash said nothing, Lila muttered something else that he couldn't quite make out.
"What did you say?"
"I said I should have drugged you and dragged you back to Fellsmarch when I had the chance."
"I'm the one with the drugs, remember?"
"Ha!"
"Anyway, since when have you—"
"Did you hear that?" Ash spun around, his hand on his amulet, staring back down the street. He glanced at Lila, who somehow had a knife in each hand. They both looked and listened.
"I guess it was the rain or the wind,"
he said finally, thinking, it's never the rain or the wind when you want it to be the rain or the wind.
"Probably,"
Lila said, the knives disappearing.
"Or Lieutenant Karn and the real Kingsguard out for a stroll."
She took another long look before she turned and trudged on, shoulders rounded under her heavy rucksack.
"What do you know about ships anyway?"
"Not much," Ash admitted. "Breaking into a ship can't be much different than any other burglary."
"Except for the part where there's no place to run if you get caught, or if somebody blows up the ship, or if a dragon decides to roast you like a chestnut."
"You can swim, can't you?"
"Of course I know how to swim, but have you smelled the river?"
Lila wrinkled her nose.
"It's a cesspool. I'm not planning to do any swimming tonight, just so you know."
"Are you really going to whine the whole time?"
Ash buckled his blackbird cloak over his collar and pulled the hood up.
"There's no reason both of us have to go,"
Lila said abruptly.
"I'll handle it. You stay here."
"Give it up, all right? If anyone stays behind, it's going to be you. Otherwise, we stay with the original plan. You deal with the explosives, I'll deal with the dragon. That way we can be there and gone in no time. If you're spotted and questioned, we're the harbor patrol, remember? We saw something suspicious, like somebody boarding their ship.
And that's why we're carrying canisters of black powder. Got it.
On reaching the docks, there was one piece of good news. At some point, Strangward's ship had raised anchor and was now tied up at the wharf, maybe to load supplies for their departure. Once again, Ash thought he heard something, soft footsteps, or maybe the creak of planks behind him. He turned, scanning the length of the dock. He saw nothing, and heard nothing beyond the slap of water against the pilings, and the clank of rigging against masts. It was near midnight, and there was just a single light burning in the wheelhouse. The crew quarters were dark and silent, the gangway was drawn up, and the ship was shrouded in a shimmering layer of what appeared to be greenish ice. Ash stood staring at it, hands on hips.
"What's that?"
Lila whispered.
I don't know,
Ash said,
but I think it means keep out.
"Can't you do something?"
Maybe.
Closing his hand on his amulet, Ash sent a tendril of magic forward. When it collided with the barrier, the ice vaporized into a poisonous-looking cloud that was carried away by a stiff wind blowing upriver. He continued until the near side of the ship was clear. They waited for someone to sound the alarm, but there was nothing. The ship appeared to be deserted.
What do you think? Ash whispered. Looks like a trap to me,
Lila said glumly. Ash threw a line over the rail and used it to pull a rope ladder up and over, then waited again. Nothing.
"I'll go up first, take a quick look, and then signal to you,"
Lila said, sliding the backpack over her shoulders. She scrambled up the ladder to where she could peer over the rail. Apparently satisfied, she vaulted over, turned, and motioned to Ash to come ahead. Then she disappeared. Ash ascended the ladder, climbed over the railing, and dropped to the deck on the other side. He pulled up the ladder so that it couldn't be seen from the wharf, then hurried amidships where the hold was. The hatch was secured by a chain and padlock. Ash melted the chain and removed it, then wrestled the hatch open. The stench from below hit him like a physical blow. We're too late, he thought, heart sinking. The dragon's already dead. He knew he should be relieved. Instead, he felt a keen sense of loss. And not just because he hated the thought of facing Jenna with the news, if he survived the night himself. Dropping the ladder into the darkness, he climbed down, using his fingertips to kindle his torch. The dragon lay at the rear of the hold. Its head was down, resting on its forelegs, and its eyes were closed and crusted, like it hadn't opened them in a while. Even its scaly armor seemed dull. Rabbit carcasses lay untouched in the corner, which accounted for some of the smell. A trickle of vapor from the dragon's nostrils was the only visible sign of life. But Ash sensed that a spark still burned deep within.
Hey, Ash murmured.
There was no response. Ash reached out with his mind, trying to make a connection. But the mind behind the eyes was murky and muddled, impossible to read or to communicate with.
What's wrong?
He asked.
Are you sick?
For a moment, he could have sworn the dragon understood. It turned its head and looked into Ash's eyes, like a plea for help. Then it rested its head on its forelegs. He eased closer until he could reach out and touch the dragon's shoulder. It was dry and cool, but maybe that was the way it was supposed to be. He pressed his fingers against the side of its neck and felt a pulse, thready and weak. Truth be told, Ash knew nothing about dragons, but his healer's instinct told him that this dragon was close to death. Was it sick because it had been penned up inside the hold too long? Had it been taken away from its mother too soon? Or had it lost the will to live? Who wouldn't in this environment?
I'm here to help you if I can, Ash said. I'm going to try and get you out of here.
The dragon didn't stir, didn't open an eye. Taking a deep breath, Ash sent magic in, exploring in totally unknown territory. The dragon was cold, 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 until he neared its head. It got warmer and warmer until he reached the area around the collar, which was blistering hot, feverish with power. What was going on? Was the collar leaking magic into the dragon? Or was it preventing it from flowing into the rest of its body? Ash ran his finger over the dragon's collar, feeling a familiar tug. Ash touched the collar around his own neck, the one that prevented him from accumulating enough flash to do mischief. The sensation was the same. The collar around the dragon's neck must serve the same purpose, to collect flash and to keep the dragon from fighting back. Ash touched the dragon's collar again, sliding his finger between the collar and the dragon's scales. He could find no opening, no catch. It seemed to be as permanent as his own. Could a lack of magic be what was making it sick? If so, elemental flash might be the cure. Experimentally, he pressed his palm against the dragon's head and fed a little flash into it. Nothing. He fed it a little more. The dragon shuddered and opened his eyes. They glowed like amber in the murky hold. "Does this help?" Ash fed him more flash. The dragon nudged Ash with its nose, pressing against him like a cat. The message was clear. "More, please." Ash complied. This time, the dragon lashed its tail against the floor. It seemed to be helping, but Ash doubted he could produce enough flash to make up for what the collar was sucking away. He had to find a way to remove the collar. Just then, the light trickling through the hatch was blotted out. "Ash, you down there?" It was Lila, her voice oddly shrill. "Yes, I was just... We've got to go, now! All hell's broken loose! Bring the dragon and come on!" Ash could hear other noises. It sounded like fighting. "I can't bring the dragon, but maybe if I..." "Then leave it and come before they... Scummer!" Lila swore. She slid through the hatch, pulling the trapdoor closed after her. For a moment she dangled from it by one hand, then dropped to the floor, crying out in pain when she landed. "What's going on?" Ash said. "Is there..." "Shh!" Lila looked up at the ceiling. What sounded like a dozen pairs of feet pounded overhead, the sound receding as whoever it was raced toward the bow of the boat. "They'll be back," Lila said. "Who's they?" "It's those miserable blood-sucking priests," Lila said. "A whole pack of them. They must have sniffed you out somehow. They've killed everyone else on board, as far as I can tell." That was when Ash noticed that Lila was favoring her right arm. When he moved the torch closer, he could see that her sleeve and the side of her jacket were sodden with blood. "You're hurt," he said. It was an ironic turnaround from the night he'd first met the Darians, back in the dormitory at Odin's Ford. "It's just a scratch, but thanks for noticing." Lila squinted into the darkness. "If we could find a way to fasten the hatch down, maybe they won't find us, or at least they'll make a lot of noise trying to get in and draw the blackbirds." It's a rare day, Ash thought, when a person actually wants to attract the attention of the King's Guard of Arden. Ash looked around. There was the washtub full of rum, some putrefying dead rabbits, his healer's kit, a sick dragon, nothing much to work with. "If not for this bloody collar, I could at least give them a warm welcome," Ash muttered. Lila stared at him, licked her lips, looked shifty-eyed and guilty. "What?" "I think I can help you with that." Digging into her carry-bag with her good hand, she pulled out a small silver object. "Turn around so I can get at your collar." "What's that?" Ash asked suspiciously, turning around. He could feel her fumbling at the back of his neck. It's a sort of a key." "A key?" "To open the collar." Lila was obviously struggling to operate the device with one hand.
You have a key to open mage collars, Ash said in a flat, deadly voice.
Well, it stands to reason that there would be keys, Lila said brightly. Otherwise there would be no way to get them. Bloody bones! Growing impatient, the dragon had nudged Lila's leg, startling her. She flailed backward, ending up on her butt on the floor, nearly eye to eye with the dragon. The key landed next to her with a soft clank. Shh, Ash hissed, looking up at the ceiling. It's all right, Ash whispered, stepping between Lila and the dragon. It's not in any condition to hurt you. He hoped. He scooped up the key and handed it back to Lila, knelt and took a closer look at her face. Don't you dare pass out until you've unlocked my collar, he thought, but didn't say it aloud because he didn't want to give her any ideas. He turned around so that she could get at the back of his neck. She fumbled with the collar again. Finally, he heard a soft click, and the collar slid forward a little. Ash gripped it on either side, pulled the halves apart, and dropped it onto the floor. Experimentally, he tilted his head one way, then the other. He fingered his amulet. It was like the floodgates burst open, and magic torrented in. Above their heads, Ash could hear voices, startlingly close.
The scent is stronger right around here.
A cold finger of fear ran down his back when he realized that they were scenting his blood. He turned to look at Lila, who was by now propped against the wall, eyes glazed with pain. Squatting next to her, he began to unbutton her jacket. She took hold of his wrist with her good hand. It was slippery with blood. "No," she said. "I'm all right. Save your strength. You're going to need it."
"Shut it," Ash murmured, gently pulling free. "I'm just going to see what's going on. I might be able to slow down the bleeding." He decided to keep her talking. "How'd you do with the explosives?"
"The ship's all wired and ready," Lila said, "for all the good it does us."
"Could you set it off from here?"
"No."
"I'm not saying now. I'm saying if it comes to that."
"I'm not blowing up this ship with you on it. I promised my Da I'd keep you alive, and I mean to keep that promise."
"Why didn't you tell me you had a key before now?"
"Well," Lila said, "I didn't have a key, not at first. By the time I got one, I was afraid you were going to get killed in an unsuccessful attempt on Montaigne, or you were going to get caught and ruin my plans."
"Thank you for the vote of confidence."
"So, as long as you had the collar on, I knew you couldn't use attack magic to do it. I'm just glad they never traced the snake and the poison back to you."
"I told you that wasn't me."
Ash had continued working, and by now he had exposed the wound, a ragged cut that had bounced off her collarbone and into the shoulder.
"Good news," he said, releasing a sigh of relief. "It's bleeding like a champ, so the risk of dying from poison is just about zero."
"Hooray," Lila said.
"If it makes you feel better, you were right. It was a bad idea to come here."
Ash pressed his fingers into the wound, trickling in magic. He had no time to do any diagnostics, but given the location of the wound, the blade was unlikely to have hit anything vital. Still, he had to stop the flow of blood, or Lila would bleed out. A minute, 2 minutes, and the flow slowed to a seep. She could live with that. He took off his cloak and laid it over her to keep her warm. Something bumped Ash's shoulder. He turned, and it was the dragon again, looking at him rather plaintively.
"Look," he said, "you're going to have to wait your turn. I've got way too many patients, and vampire priests trying to get in, and—"
He stopped talking and looked up. Somebody was fumbling with the hatch. Ash stealthily rose to his feet, stretched, gripped the handles, and hung on. The hatch lid moved a little, so that he could see light around the edges, but whoever was outside was unable to lift both Ash and the hatch, and it stayed closed.
"It must be locked,"
one of the priests said, pounding on it, the way people do for no good reason. Did he really think that if they were down there, they were going to answer the door?
"He must be down there," a second voice said. "We've searched everywhere else, and the demon stench seems to be coming from here.
The hatch rattled again.
I'm lead on this, remember?
Priest number 1 growled.
We all agreed that I'm to be first to bleed the demon mage. I didn't agree to that,
Priest number 2 retorted.
You were there,
Priest number 1 said.
That was days ago. If you wanted first blood, you should have cut one of the other mages. They aren't the same,
Priest number 1 whined.
There's something different about them. Foreign tasting. We'd better decide before the others finish with the ones in the cabin, a new voice said, or there'll be all of us sharing. You are not in on this, Robert,
said Priest number 2.
Why don't you go back and see how the others are doing? Maybe they'll share.
The squabbling continued, growing more heated. At least they'd left off yanking on the hatch, but Ash knew it couldn't last forever. He found the collar and retrieved some of his smaller weapons, secreting them on his person. Not that he was likely to live long enough to use them, but still. His flash was building, but it was like he was trying to stopper multiple holes in a crumbling dike. There was no way he could hang on to the hatch, heal Lila, and see to the dragon as well. He needed some help. Which gave him an idea. Quietly, he let go of the handles, knelt, and began running his fingers over the floor. "What are you doing?" It was Lila, her voice barely a whisper.
"Looking for the key. Ah, here it is."
He held it up triumphantly, then looked it over. It was hinged, 2 half circles that seemed to fit together to form a tube.
"How does this work?"
"This doesn't seem like a good time to—"
"I'm going to free the dragon," Ash said.
"Oh, I see. The situation isn't bad enough, so you're going to try and make it worse."
"I know what I'm doing," Ash said. "The dragon can be a distraction."
"A distraction, right. Being burned alive would distract me from my other troubles."
She rolled her eyes.
"You're just hoping it will set the ship on fire, and then it'll blow."
Well, he was hoping that, just a little.
"Lila, I need to know now."
"All right, fine. It fits onto the collar. Once you close it, slide it along, and when you hear a click, you've reached the latch. If you pull on the collar, it should come apart at that spot."
Ash eased up next to the dragon. Its golden eyes were fixed on him, pinning him like a serpent's.
"Let's try this,"
he murmured. He released a little flash into the dragon to placate him. Then, slipping his fingers under the metal collar, he managed to slide the key under. He brought the 2 halves together, then attempted to slide it along the collar. It just barely fit, and it slid in fits and starts. He worked it around the dragon's neck, slowly, listening hard. Finally, he heard a click. Gently, he pulled on the 2 sides of the collar, and it came apart in his hands. He was out of time. Metal scraped on metal as the hatch shifted. Light poured in. Ash leapt to grab the handles. He hung on, but this time the priests seemed to have found a way to work together. Ash found himself rising with the hatch until he was looking into the hooded face and fanatical eyes of a Darien brother. Multiple blades sliced at him frantically. He let go and fell back into the hold. He heard the crash as the priests toppled backward and the hatch landed on the deck above. He looked over at Lila. Her eyes were closed. The dragon lay quietly alert, watching him, as if to see what he would do next.
"Now we're in for it," Ash thought.
He touched his amulet. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Though if he fried the first few who came through the hatch, he might discourage the rest for a while.
"Where's the bloody King's Guard when you need them?" he thought.
Guarding the bloody king, no doubt. If he set fire to the ship, would the charges go? He tried to remember what Jenna had said about that.
"All right, Sulhan, would you rather burn to death, be blown to bits, or have a bunch of fanatics suck you dry?"
Ash gripped his serpent amulet, the one that had belonged to his father. and waited for the first vampire priest to come through the door. 39. The Devil's Bargain. Jenna lay awake in her tower room, listening to a thunderstorm roll in from the northwest. The wind howled, lashing against the walls. Rain thundered on the tile roof, and she could hear it splattering from the mouths of the gargoyles to either side of her window. Thunder crashed, reverberating through the stones of the castle, and lightning glared through the barred window, creating crazy, shifting designs on the walls. A change in the weather, Jenna thought, for better or worse. She propped up, looking around her chamber, reorienting herself. She'd not slept soundly since she'd been moved from her dungeon room. It was ironic, since this bed was more comfortable and was not infested with vermin, and she didn't have to worry about rats coming out of the walls. Well, maybe that last part wasn't entirely true. This palace was swarming with human rats, and they might be coming for her before long. Every time she closed her eyes, dreams, images, and memories swarmed through her head. That voice pleading for help. "Flamecaster, we are dying." She was flying over a coastline where the turquoise sea met white sands and buff-colored cliffs. The wind tore at her hair. She slitted her eyes against the wind and... No, it wasn't the sea. It was Adam Wolf's eyes, dark with desire, and the taste of his kisses. It was his embraces, all long limbs and gentle, knowledgeable hands. It was the scent of his skin and the thud of his heart. It was the way he haunted those borderlands between life and death, dark and light, pain and pleasure, and how he selflessly healed other people's wounds while he kept his own hidden away. Gerard Montaigne, the demon who held her fate in his hands. Maybe. And Evan Strangward, who struck an odd chord of memory in her. Why did he seem so familiar? Tonight, Adam would put their plan into motion. It hadn't happened yet, otherwise the palace would be buzzing like a kicked-over beehive. It satisfied her spirit of anarchy, the notion that she could strike one last blow against the King of Arden, whether she landed it herself or not. Sliding from her bed, she padded in her bare feet to the window. The wind had driven the rain through the narrow windows of her cell, making puddles on the floor. She shivered. The nightshirt the healer had given her was gone, replaced by a silk nightgown that reached nearly to her ankles. At least her legs were covered now. She leaned on the broad stone windowsill, staring out through the grill of metal, thinking that, what with the sound of the storm, she was unlikely to hear an explosion down at the wharf. Please, she thought, though she wasn't one for praying. Whatever happens, let Adam be all right. She heard a faint noise in the corridor and whirled, staring at the door, heart thumping. It sounded like a grunt of surprise and pain, followed by a thud as a body hit the floor. As she watched, the door eased partly open, spilling the light from the hallway into her room. Who would have reason to sneak into her room at this time of night? Surely not the king or his minions. Was it a rescue? A kidnapping? Some kind of ambush? She looked around for weapons, grabbed up an oil lamp and waited, scarcely daring to breathe, until the door swung open the rest of the way. First in the door was a huge man with a long braid on one side of his head. She recognized him. He'd be difficult to forget. He'd been with the Carthian delegation in the king's presence chamber. The Carthian scanned the room, sword in hand, before stepping aside to admit the others. There followed 4 more, 3 men and a woman, who took their places just inside the door to her room, as if standing guard. And finally, Evan Strangward, wearing a knee-length coat over his clothes. Definitely not a rescue, then. Strangward turned and spoke hurriedly to someone out in the corridor. Looking through the doorway past him, Jenna saw that it was Destin Karn. Karn nodded at whatever the mage had said, and pulled the door shut. Had the king changed his mind about the interview Strangward had requested? If so, why was this happening in the middle of the night? And where were the blackbirds? Strangward stood, feet braced apart, hands on hips, and studied her. She felt self-conscious, standing there in her nightclothes, the wind whipping her gown around her legs, wishing she had a robe to put on. She tried not to look at her rumpled bed. Jenna raised the lamp. "Stay back," she said, "or I'll use this." It probably wasn't a very effective threat against a mage with a sword.
"Jenna," he said, "I apologize for the late-night visit, but we are running out of time. Your king has forced my hand."
Not my king, Jenna thought.
"What do you mean?"
"I had meant to take you back with me, and so have the time to find out more about you. From the looks of things, that might not happen."
Jenna stared at him, her mind racing. Did that mean the deal was off? Adam had said they hadn't come to terms. There was something furtive about Strangward's expression and the way he kept looking at the door. His guards stood clustered, fondling the hilts of their curved swords, their bodies rigid with tension.
"Does the king know you're here?"
Jenna said, taking a shot in the dark. Strangward shrugged, rubbed his nose, and said,
"No, he doesn't."
"You're not afraid that I'll scream and bring the guard running?"
"That's possible, but not too likely," Strangward said. "We've dispatched the guards outside your door. Since this is the only occupied room in this tower, I doubt you'll be heard, especially with the storm going on. All in all, it seemed a tolerable risk." He gestured toward her, an invitation. "Would you like to give it a go? Screaming, I mean."
It's not like she would feel any safer with Montaigne's men in the room. At least this way she might learn something useful.
"No," she said. "I suppose not."
"Good," he said. "Shall we sit?"
He gestured toward the chair by the hearth. She was just stubborn enough that she sat on the edge of the hearth rather than in the chair. Touching his amulet, Strangward kindled the logs in the fireplace with a gesture, then sat down on the hearth as well, a few feet away from her.
"If certain people knew that it was this easy to slip into the palace uninvited, the king would have been dead a long time ago," Jenna said.
To her surprise, he laughed, long and hard.
"You really don't like him, do you?"
he said, wiping at his eyes. Jenna breathed in through her nose. He had a wild scent about him, like sunlight and rain in the dust, and storms coming in from the sea. It was familiar, like a taut line that connected the two of them together. They couldn't possibly have met before, could they?
"Have you ever been to Delphi?"
she asked, extending her hands toward the fire, warming them.
"No,"
he said, leaning back against the fireplace and crossing his legs at the ankle. Although he must have been in a hurry, he made a show of making himself at home.
"I have not. Why do you ask?"
"I keep wondering if we've met before."
He tilted his head, studying her.
"Strange. I was thinking the same thing. Your eyes are memorable, like cat's eyes."
"So I'm told," Jenna said.
"Perhaps," he said, "we met in a dream."
"I am not a dreamer,"
Jenna lied.
"You said you wanted to talk to me. What about?"
He sat up then, uncrossed his ankles, and planted his feet on the floor, a signal that he was getting down to business.
"Let me see the mage mark again."
Jenna gathered her hair into her fist, lifted it away from her neck, then turned her back so the emissary could see. He reached out and put his hand on her bare shoulder, turning her a bit more. The fingers of his other hand, warm and dry, stinging with magic, traced the pattern just below her hairline. She shivered, feeling the goose flesh rise under his hand.
He said.
Now he closed both hands on her shoulders, and she felt a whisper of power as he sent it into her. She knew he was trying to use magic in order to get the truth from her, just as Karn had done. She gritted her teeth, but put up with it, thinking that if he learned something, he'd share it with her.
"You're not a mage,"
he said finally, sounding surprised. "I'm not a mage," she said, rolling her eyes. "Didn't Karn tell you that? I would have told you that too if you'd asked."
"What kind of magic do you have, then?"
What makes you think I have magic?
"The Empress is hunting you for a reason. Since she's greedy for power, I assume that you have something she wants."
I'm not going to apologize for being just an ordinary person. To tell you the truth, I haven't been all that impressed with the gifted people I've met so far."
"No,"
Strangward said, shaking his head.
"There's got to be more to you than that."
Has it occurred to you that I'm not the one the Empress is looking for? That I'm just a girl with a birthmark who has nothing to do with any of this?"
"That may be," Strangward said, "but I can't take that chance. If you tell me the truth, I might be able to help you, depending on what the truth is."
Jenna's anger rekindled.
"You'll help me? Before you came along, I didn't need help."
He frowned at her, as if confused.
"What have I done?"
The anger that had been simmering in Jenna came to a full boil.
"I had a life," she said. "It was a hard, desperate life, but it was something. Your mistress set the King of Arden to hunting me, and I lost my only family, my home, and my livelihood in the space of a month. Since then, I've been chained in a dungeon. Forgive me if I'm not eager to accept your offer of help."
"I am sorry about what's happened to you,"
Strangward said. He stood and paced back and forth.
"I know what it's like to be hunted."
Through the window, Jenna heard the bells in the temple tower strike 1.
"My lord."
The tallest of Strangward's companions nodded toward the window and raised his eyebrows.
"I know, Tessa. I just need a little more time."
Strangward came back and sat down on the hearth, letting his hands drop between his knees. He took a deep breath, then said,
"Tell me about your relationship with the Empress Celestine."
"I am sick and tired of answering the same questions over and over," Jenna said, her voice rising. "Why don't you ask one of the other dozen people who've asked?"
The emissary raised both hands, as if to fend her off.
"I am sorry for that, but I just want to make very sure, that we haven't missed anything."
She shivered, and it wasn't just the draft from the window. There was something about the way he said it. Something told her that there was a lot riding on the answer. Abruptly, he gripped her hands again and sent more power sizzling into her.
"Why is the Empress looking for you? Tell me."
Finally, he let go and muttered,
"This isn't working, is it? You really are resistant to magic."
He said it like he was confirming something he'd been told. But now images swirled through her mind, spinning so rapidly that she couldn't fasten on any one of them. She pressed her hands to either side of her head, as if she could trap them somehow. What was it? It was so damned frustrating.
"My lord,"
the man called Teza said again,
"we cannot stay much longer if we're to catch the tide."
Strangward nodded then, as if resigned. He squatted in front of Jenna so he could look her in the eyes.
"Are you telling me the truth, Jenna?"
he asked quietly, in a last chance kind of way.
"You really don't know why the Empress is so desperate to find you? This is really important to both of us."
"No," she said. "I don't know. I wish that I did. I'd hope that you would explain it to me. I suppose we'll just have to."
Her voice trailed off. She'd heard another voice, deep in her mind, stronger than it had been before.
"Flamecaster, I come."
"Lord Strangward, a moment,"
Teza said, motioning him closer. Strangward stood and crossed to where his liegeman waited near the door.
I know this is hard for you, Tessa said in a voice that Jenna shouldn't have been able to hear. If it must be done, let me do it. It is not fair for me to ask you to do this task for me, Strangward said. You've risked your life. You've lost so much already. I'll do it myself. But I'm volunteering, my lord. You know that I'm good with a blade. It will be a quick, kind cut. She won't feel it, I promise.
Jenna's heart began to thump. She was no lamb waiting patiently to be sacrificed. Easing to her feet, she grabbed up the oil lamp from the hearth, sprinted toward them, and flung it at the two of them. It shattered on the floor at their feet, spilling burning oil over the floor and the two men.
Flamecaster!
Jenna bolted for the door, leaping over a puddle of burning oil. She grabbed the door handle and yanked at it. Someone, Strangward or Tessa, seized her arms and shoulders, dragging her back. They slipped in the oil and fell. The back of her head slammed into stone, and lights exploded behind her eyes. She heard screaming, someone calling her name, the door opening and closing. She smelled burning flesh and wondered if it might be hers. At that moment, one of the images Strangward had given her finally came into focus. It was a silver-haired woman standing next to a fiery crater. She held a struggling child in her hands, dangling him over the flames. And then, as Jenna watched, horrified, she let him go. She propped up to find that there was flame all around her. The draperies were ablaze, and the tapestries smoldering, stinking of burning wool and lanolin. Flames burned ceiling high between her and the door. There would be no escape that way. She saw 2 charred bodies, but nobody else. The rest must have fled and left her here to burn. She guessed her skin must be charred as well, because it felt oddly numb. She looked down and saw that her arms were encased in glittering scales, her hands replaced by claws. It reminded her of the way her wound had looked when it began to heal. The scales were gold and silver and copper, all the colors of her hair. She screamed, but the sound was lost in the inferno. I'm addled by the smoke and the blow to my head, Jenna thought. I've got to get to fresh air. Crawling on her hands and knees over broken glass, she made her way to the window, where the wind still howled through the grate. Only now snow swirled into the room, and hailstones the size of marbles clattered on the floor. She huddled under the window, her arms wrapped around herself, waiting to burn to death. And then it occurred to her that she didn't have to wait. She tied the packet the healer had given her inside her bodice, so it hung between her breasts. She caught a claw under it and lifted it out, but then could not manage to untie the string with her hands the way they were. She bit at the string, then tried to rip apart the cloth bag. As she did so, the berries fell out, landing somewhere on the floor. She groped with her clawed hands, but couldn't find them by feel or by scent. She screamed, a harsh cry of despair and frustration that echoed around the room. There came an answering cry from outside the tower, a cry that resonated inside her. She thrust her face into the wind, into the clean, cold air, slitting her eyes against the bits of ice. Pressing her claws against the marble, she cried, "Flamecaster!" and heard the beating of wings.
40. Death by Dragon. Ash cut the throat of the first priest who dropped through the hatch. He didn't need flash for that. He stopped the heart of the second, which didn't take much. With the third, though, there wasn't time for finesse. Ash immolated him before he hit the floor. It felt good to be using attack magic again, as if he were using muscles he hadn't stretched in a while. Then something struck him hard on the shoulder, sending him flying into the wall. It was the dragon. It was trying to open its wings.
"Not down here,"
Ash hissed, scrambling to his feet. But by that time, one of the priests had dropped into the hold and stood facing Ash, his blade in his hand, so fixed on his target and the scent of blood that he didn't seem to notice the dragon.
"Prepare to die, demon,"
the priest said, drawing his lips away from yellowed teeth stained with blood. It was the nightmare in the dormitory room all over again.
the dragon can be a distraction. That's what he told Lila. Ash pointed over the priest's shoulder.
Look out for the dragon, he said. If you think I am so foolish as to— Ah!
Ash dove out of danger as the dragon lashed his tail, the spikes impaling the oblivious priest, then smashed him against the wall to either side. Ash covered Lila with his body as tiles shattered all around them, the shards littering the floor and biting into his exposed skin. Death by dragon. That hadn't been on his list of possibilities. More priests were wedged into the hatch, all of them trying to get through at once. The dragon sent flame torrenting into them, wave after wave, and the screaming began. The noise was deafening, the shrieking of the priests, the dragon's primal cries of rage and fear. Ash's eyes burned as he breathed in the stench of sulfur and charred flesh. Well, all right, Ash thought. Maybe freeing the dragon wasn't such a good idea, especially since there was no way any of them could get out of the hold. Then again, it was a great distraction, and he was enjoying watching those meetings between the dragon and the priests. The dragon roared a battle cry. His legs bunched under him, and he launched, smashing through decking, sending what remained of the priests flying in all directions. Another scream of rage, and it was gone, leaving a charred hole behind. Rain poured through the shattered deck, sending steam rising where it hit burning wood and bodies. Turned out there was a way out for a dragon. And now, for them.
Let's go,
Ash said, giving Lila a hand up.
I don't think we want to stay and find out if Dragonflame can set off the explosives.
They climbed over and around mounds of rubble, passing through the hole where the wall of the hold had been, moving forward until they found a stairway. Lila cried out once or twice when she bumped or jostled her arm, then pressed her lips tightly together, as if to prevent its happening again. Once on deck, they hurried aft to the gangway. Ash didn't think Lila could manage the rope ladder. The dock was swarming with blackbirds who must have come running at the sight of the burning ship. Ash scanned them, looking for someone that he knew, and spotted Marc Desjardins. He and Guy Fleury were busy wetting down the docks and hurrying masters to their ships so that they could get underway and out of danger.
Mark,
he called from the deck.
Barrow Hill is hurt. She needs a healer right away.
Mark motioned to a handful of wide-eyed healers standing by for orders. Ash was pleased to see that Harold and Boyd were among them.
Harold, Boyd, get over here.
They hustled forward, bursting with importance, pleased and proud at being chosen out. When Harold recognized Ash, he said,
Master Adam, why are you wearing a guardsman's cloak? I got cold, Ash said, and so did Barrow Hill. She's been stabbed, and I know I can count on you to take care of her until I get back.
I'm all right,
Lila hissed.
I need to take care of the... you know.
I'll handle it, Ash said.
Turning back to the apprentices, he said, It was a 4-inch blade, entry between the collarbone and the right shoulder. I've stopped the bleeding on the outside at least. Apply a dressing and bandage, then immobilize the arm and fashion a sling. Keep her warm and keep her quiet. Make sense? They nodded in unison, ignoring Lila's grumbled protests. Check her pulse and breathing every few minutes. I'll be right back. He handed Lila off to the two of them.
Where are you going? I'm going to check for any other survivors on board.
And kill them. He caught Mark's arm. Move everyone away from the ship, as far away as possible. Don't let anyone else get on board. The way it's burning, I wouldn't be surprised if it explodes. Without waiting for a response, Ash jogged back up the gangway. He searched the main deck from bow to stern, wishing he knew how many priests had boarded to begin with, so that he could account for them all. There were 3 Darien bodies scattered around the hatch opening, and 1 priest near death, broken and badly burned, who Ash had to finish. He made himself climb back down into the hold, where he found 3 more dead. In the crew cabin, 2 of Strangward's mages lay crumpled on the floor, sucked dry. That was it. There was no sign of the dragon, nor Strangward, Vaughn, and the rest of his crew. They must have disembarked before the attack began. Where could they be? Where else would they go in Ardenskourt? He'd had the impression that the emissary didn't mean to stray far from his ship. He recalled the conversation in the presence chamber, the expression on Strangward's face when the king refused to make an immediate trade. Was it possible he'd decided to go after Jenna himself? If he had, would he know where to find her? Possibly. Somehow Strangward had known that Jenna had been found and had come to collect her. He must have an informant at court. The longer Ash thought about it, the more convinced he became that wherever Jenna was, that's where he would find Strangward, and he needed to find them right now. Before Ash returned ashore, he took one more walk around the ship, lighting the slow fuses that Jenna had recommended. From what he could tell, Lila had done her job well. He hoped they would both survive long enough for him to tell her so. 41. Flamecaster. The wall of the tower room shattered, sending shards of stone flying, all but burying Jenna. She struggled to free herself from the cairn of stones. Blood poured down into her eyes from a cut on her scalp, so that she could scarcely see. When she finally staggered to her feet, the wind caught her, nearly toppling her, and needled her face with sleet and cold rain. Her arms and legs were still covered with armor-like scales. Every time I think things can't get any worse, they do. She found herself standing on what remained of the tower, a platform littered with rubble. Everything above her head was gone, and only one wall remained of what had been her tower cell. She cowered against the wall, shivering, mingled blood and rainwater splattering on the stones under her feet. Had the tower been struck by lightning, or a typhoon, or what? At least the rain was putting out the fire. She heard another screaming cry and a furious beating of wings. She looked up just as an enormous beast stooped down on her, claws extended, its huge wings blocking out the sky. Instinctively, she crouched so as to make a small target, closed her eyes, and covered her head with her arms, waiting for its razored claws to sink into her flesh. Instead, she heard a splash as it hit the deck next to her. She cracked her eyes open to see it skidding across the wet surface of the platform, flapping furiously to keep from sliding off the edge. It managed to stop at the far side, balancing on the edge. Once stable, it turned back toward her, straightening its crumpled wings. Then it came to her, what she was seeing. It must be, the Empress's dragon. Ash must have managed to free it. And then it had come straight here to kill her. Scummer. It was about the size of a large horse, with huge feet and a massive head, like it wasn't fully grown. It had large golden eyes set on either side of its face, horns and claws that left long gashes in the wood floor. Its back was armored with 2 rows of sharp spines, running from just behind its shoulders to the end of its tail, which was so long that it hung over the edge of the building. It seemed to grow larger and larger as it came toward her, flame and smoke fuming from its nostrils. I guess I can still find a way to burn to death, Jenna thought, but she was too dull-witted and dizzy to fight back, or even to move. When it was within a few feet of her, it stopped and cocked its head. Flamecaster. The word sounded inside her head, a question mark at the end. Understanding flooded in. It was the voice she'd been hearing since the emissary's arrival. I'm either dead or dreaming, she thought. But sometimes you just need to go on with it. Flamecaster, Jenna repeated. Is that your name? Have you been looking for me? It inched forward, head bowed, and bumped its nose timidly against her knee. She rested her claw-like hand on its head, feeling its hot breath on her bare toes, the scent of char and flame mingling in her nose. She tried to remember what she'd heard about dragons, besides the fact that they are made up. Did they eat people? I'm Jenna, she said, as if it wouldn't eat her once they were introduced. She could feel the push of the dragon's mind, as if it were seeking an opening that it knew was there. Finally, something came through clearly. It was more an image in her mind than a word.
Jenna.
"That's right," she said. "You're just a littling, aren't you?" she murmured, scratching behind its horns. It nudged her like a cat, wanting more. But a dragon is not a cat. She ended up flat on her back, with the dragon looking down at her, all shamefaced, its golden eyes wide with alarm.
Jenna, hurt.
"You don't know your own strength, do you?" she said, forcing a smile to reassure it. She managed to sit up, resisting the temptation to close her eyes and let the rain fall on her face. She was shaking, teeth chattering, fighting off waves of dizziness. Help? At first she thought he was asking for help, but then she realized that it was offering help.
"I wish you could help,"
she said, blotting at her eyes.
"I dropped my berries, and I can't find them."
She knew she sounded like a loon, but she couldn't seem to form a sentence that made sense.
"Berries?"
Flamecaster said eagerly.
"Want food?"
Jenna laughed, stroking the dragon's head. She looked down at her own arms. Her scales were fading now that the fire was out, and her hands were losing their claw-like appearance. It was as if she armored up only when she needed that protection. All right, then, she thought. Tally up another gift, you bloodthirsty bastards. First it was fire, and now ice. She was freezing in the wind and sleet, clad only in her thin silk gown. Flamecaster's body burned with a hot, dry heat that was just what she craved. Jenna pressed herself against him in an effort to warm herself. She could hear his heart beating, and hers began to beat in time. The dragon shifted, sliding his body under her, gripping her arm and rolling a little so that she ended up lying on top of him, just forward of where the spines began, her face pressed against his muscled neck. She wrapped her arms around his neck and tightened her knees around his body. It was like hugging a wood-burning stove, only more intimate somehow.
"Thank you," she murmured. "That's much warmer. It really... Now, fly!"
Claws rattled against stone as Flamecaster charged forward and launched from the tower with Jenna clinging to his back. Jenna screamed and kept on screaming, her voice mingling with that of the dragon. At first it was all terror, but soon became a cry of ferocious joy. They soared out over the castle close. The city beneath them was as small as a child's toy village left out in the rain, with poofs of smoke from many chimneys. Squinting her eyes against the rain, she looked back at the ruined tower, which resembled a charred and broken tooth. "Take that, you gutter-swiving, murderous, black-hearted devil." She tightened her knees against the dragon's sides and whooped. So this is what heaven is like, she thought. Who knew? They were over the harbor now. Below she saw a ship with broken masts and a hole in the side. It looked tiny from so high above. Could that be the emissary's ship? Though badly damaged, it was still afloat.
"Chains and stinging collars. Dark, stinking hole. Enemies."
"Yes," Jenna whispered, pressing her cheek against Flamecaster's neck. "Enemies." They were some distance east of the river when they were buffeted by a shock wave and an ear-splitting series of booms that sent Flamecaster spinning sideways, flapping madly until he could regain his balance. Jenna looked back toward the city and saw that the ship had exploded, leaving chunks of burning debris floating in the water and little else. Adam Wolf had come through. If the emissary and all his friends hadn't burned to death, she hoped that they had returned to their ship in time to blow up with it. Jenna thrust her face into the rain and wind and screamed with a savagery she'd never tapped before. That was when she realized that they were losing altitude, despite the dragon's efforts to keep them aloft. Jenna wasn't heavy, but she was likely too much weight for a young dragon to carry, especially one that was injured. She leaned down to where she thought his ear might be and said, "Flamecaster, find a place to land. I don't want us to fall." He beat his wings, achieving a shallow glide, flying east. She fell asleep and dreamed of Adam Wolf. Stay safe. She didn't know how much later it was when they landed. She jolted awake as they bounced, then bounced again, and came to a sliding stop. They were on a beach. The rain had stopped, but the sand was still pockmarked from the recent storm. A few stars had shaken off the clouds and glimmered overhead. To the west, the moon was rising, gilding a path on the breast of the ocean. Jenna had never seen the sea. She blinked, scraping her wet and bloody hair out of her eyes, and drank it in, her heart full to bursting. When she finally looked down at herself, the scales had disappeared. She hurt all over, especially her head. She was hungry and ferociously tired, but she was alive. Flamecaster was obviously exhausted too. He lay, head on his forelegs, already sound asleep. Jenna crawled into the warm shelter of the dragon's body and closed her eyes again. 42. Back at the castle. Ash knew it wouldn't be easy to convince Lila to stay behind while he returned to the castle to look for Strangward. He sidestepped the issue by avoiding the conversation altogether. He used the rope ladder at the bow end of the ship to descend to the wharf. He spoke briefly with Mark, telling him that he'd found no survivors on board, and reminded him to keep people away from the ship until the fires burned out. The storm was still raging with a ferocity Ash hadn't seen since he came south. Even with his blackbird cloak, he was soaked through before he'd gone a block. He was halfway up Citadel Hill when he heard it, a thunderous boom behind him. He swung around in time to see the second explosion, and the third. A fireball rose from wharfside, raining burning debris over the warehouses and taverns near the docks. Ash was glad it was raining, making it less likely that the buildings would catch. By the time the last of the charges went off, the ship was engulfed in flames.
"Sail that, Strangward," Ash whispered, and then, "Thank you, Jenna." He couldn't wait to see her face. When he caught his first glimpse of the keep, he nearly stumbled. The tallest of the towers, the one that housed Jenna's new quarters, was broken, a large bite having been taken out of the very top. How would that have happened in the short time he'd been away? He hurried on. Though it was the small hours of the morning, the streets grew more and more crowded as he approached the close. He began seeing chunks of stonework and masonry lying about, bits of the demolished tower. One woman was sweeping grit and stone from her stoop in the rain, her face set and angry. "What's going on?" he asked her.
"A demon smashed into the tower and knocked it half down," she said. "I was asleep, mind you, so I didn't see it. People said it lit up the whole sky, it burned so bright."
"A demon?" Ash stared at her. "Did they say what it looked like?"
"It had wings and a long tail. It looked like a flying snake or a dragon."
"A dragon," Ash repeated numbly.
"Aye,"
the woman said with the sort of grim satisfaction some people have when they've been proven right.
"It must have been sent down here by the witch in the north to punish us."
She made the sign of Malthus and continued sweeping.
"Was anybody hurt?"
he asked, his heart sinking.
"You'll have to ask them that know more,"
she said, nodding toward the keep. The dragon he'd freed had flown straight to the castle. Was that the purpose of the emissary's visit, to carry out an attack on Arden from the inside? And Ash had helped make it happen. He'd launched a new kind of arrow into the sky without knowing where it would land. Within the close, blackbirds milled about, their hands on their swords as if they anticipated another attack at any moment. Some of the officers seemed to be questioning witnesses. Ash approached one of them.
"What's going on?" he said. "There was an attack on the castle. Maybe a bomb thrown from a catapult, we don't know. Was anybody hurt?" "I don't know for sure. I've been outside the whole time. Somebody said they found a couple bodies up near the top, where the break is."
"Who was it?" Ash said hoarsely. "The bodies, I mean."
The blackbird shrugged. "I guess they couldn't tell. They was burned so bad."
"Thank you," Ash said. Fear and despair welled up in him like vomit. "I'll go look for myself." A few of the nobility with quarters in the castle close had gathered in the great hall, which likely seemed safer than anywhere out on the grounds. In one corner, Father Fausnot was holding a prayer service for a rapt audience, most on their knees on the stone floor. Ash spotted Boditort standing with a small group of retainers issuing orders. He drifted close enough to hear.
"Beecham, take 5 men to Brightstone Keep and stay there. Warn the steward to keep the children inside and the livestock in the riverside pastures so they can keep an eye on them. We've sent messages to Middlesea and Baston Bay to put them on alert, but the last thing we need is stories about dragons and witches spreading through the countryside. Granger and LaRue have escorted the prince and princess to safety in the countryside, until we see what's what." "Lord Boditort," Ash said, joining the group. "What's happened? Is anyone in need of a healer?"
Boditort gripped his elbow hard and pulled him aside.
"We are not entirely sure," he said, speaking low and fast. "It seems that the dragon escaped from the emissary's ship and attacked the keep. We don't know whether it was an accident or part of a plan, and if it is a plan, who is behind it."
"Where is the emissary?" Ash asked.
"Nobody knows. He seems to have disappeared. The bodies of 2 of his guards were found in the tower, in the—" he lowered his voice, "in the cell where the mage-marked girl was being kept, where they had no business being."
Why were they in the tower at the time of the dragon attack? Had they called it there somehow?
"And the girl, what about her?" "We haven't found her. Her body could be up there somewhere, buried in rubble, or she might be lying anywhere within a mile of the keep. The beast hit right at the level of her room."
Had the Empress meant to murder Jenna all along? Or had Strangward been ordered to kill her if they hadn't come to terms? Ash felt the pain of remorse like a knife in his gut. If she's dead, then it's my fault, he thought. It didn't matter that King Gerard, Strangward, and the Empress had all played a role. That did not diminish his own guilt. It was his father's death all over again. Only this time, the King of Arden was within reach. Maybe.
"The king and the queen? Are they safe?"
Ash struggled to keep the menace out of his voice. Fortunately, Boditort didn't notice.
"Neither were hurt in the attack. King Gerard seems badly shaken, which I suppose is understandable." "I'm sorry to hear that," Ash said. "Perhaps I can give him something that will settle his nerves, in a permanent sort of way. Do you know where he is?"
Boditort shook his head.
"I don't know. If you do find him, I hope you can help him."
He paused, choosing his words carefully.
"He's not been himself lately. We need strong leadership at a time like this." "I understand, my lord," Ash said, turning away. Ash climbed the steps into the tower, 2 at a time. It had been nearly empty while Jenna was in residence there, and now it appeared to be completely deserted. There were few signs of damage until he reached the floor below Jenna's rooms. Here it looked like there had been one of the earth shakes he'd heard were common along the southern coast. Walls were cracked, and some seemed near collapse. As he climbed the next flight of steps, he could hear the wind whistling through up above. When he emerged from the stairwell, he found nothing but ruins. The tower walls were gone on 3 sides, and everything above Jenna's floor was missing. Some of the furniture was still there, although it was charred and burned. It resembled a child's dollhouse, where the sides have been peeled away so you can look into the rooms. "Jenna!"
he shouted, the wind whipping the word away as soon as he released it.
"Jenna, it's Adam!"
If there was a response, he didn't hear it. The rain had churned ashes and cinders into a black soup, As Ash crossed the floor, glass crunched under his feet. He found 2 bodies against the remaining wall, burned nearly beyond recognition. When he looked closer, bits of braid and jewelry told him that they were the emissary's guard. Ash walked the room in a miasma of grief and rage, forcing himself to search methodically. He found charred scraps of fabric in purple silk, the dress Jenna had worn to the meeting with the emissary. He tucked the fragments of silk inside his shirt for safekeeping. The iron bed frame remained, though the bedclothes were a soggy, blackened mess, and on the table next to the bed, a lump of charred leather and water-soaked paper. Her book. I wonder if she finished it. He blotted tears from his eyes, recalling what she'd said on their last night together. I want to live. I want to hear the bells in the temple church in Delphi ringing out the victory. I want to hike into the spirit mountains and speak to witches and fairies. I want to sail over the ocean, all the way to the horizon and beyond. I want to go all those places I've never seen, except in books. I want to fly. He slipped his hand inside his coat, fingering the battered gold pendant she'd given him. It looked like a piece of a mariner's compass. He remembered what she'd said. You can give it back to me when I see you again. When you love someone, that catches the attention of the gods who punish you. He walked to the edge and looked out over the city. Where would Jenna's body have landed if she'd been thrown from the building by a dragon? It made no sense that a dragon would kill her. He'd always heard that dragons loved beautiful things. I should have killed it when I had the chance, but Jenna wanted it freed. Ash heard a slight sound behind him, like a boot crunching into glass. He began to turn, reaching for his amulet, but it was too late. A hard push between his shoulder blades, and he was falling over the edge and into space. Desperately, he grabbed at the air, and his hands fastened on a pair of gargoyles, drain spouts on either side of the window. He dangled from the spouts until his toes found a bit of a ledge to dig into. The wind was howling, and the stone was slippery from the rain. Ash was afraid to move for fear of losing his hold and falling the rest of the way. He looked up, blinking away rain, to see Gerard Montaigne standing over him. He resembled some avenging spirit in a cautionary tale, silhouetted against the roiling clouds, with his cloak whipping in the wind. The king knelt, reached down, and yanked Ash's amulet over his head. The serpent amulet his father had given him. Ash was helpless to stop him. Montaigne tossed the amulet over his shoulder. Ash heard the clank as it hit the stone floor.
So, Adam Freeman,
the king said as if he no longer believed in the name.
I see that you are uncollared once more. How could that have happened?
Ash couldn't think of any answer that would be helpful, so he said nothing at all.
I am wondering why it is that, ever since you arrived in Ardencourt, I've had one piece of bad luck after another.
Ash judged the distance between them. He shifted his feet, seeking more secure footing. With a better base, he might be able to push up and grab the king's ankles. He'd fall, but he'd take the king with him, and just now that seemed like a worthwhile trade, especially with Jenna gone. But if he missed or lost his grip... When Ash said nothing, the king continued on.
Fires in the kitchen, snakes in my bed, poison in the wassail, and now dragons on the tower. Truly, I am beginning to feel like a target.
Keep him talking. Buy some time to think.
Maybe it's time to make your peace with the Maker, Ash said, to take a close look at your life so far and... Do not dare to defile the Maker's name, Gerard thundered. You are not worthy.
But don't rile him up enough so he ends it now. Ash hung there silently, as if chastened.
I was forced to dispose of my beloved Estelle, Montaigne said, back to icy calm. I loved her, but once I realized that she had been corrupted, she had to be sacrificed.
He paused, as if gathering his thoughts. Ash had left most of his arsenal of poisons with the discarded collar, but not everything. Keeping a tight hold on the gargoyle with one hand, he slid the other into the pocket of his cloak, groping until he found what he was looking for, the sting in its leather sheath. Using his teeth, he pulled the sheath away.
But that is nothing next to these recent calamities. The Thanes were already mutinous, always whining about paying for this holy war against northern witchery. Then Delphi falls to a mob of coal miners. Ships explode in the harbor, and a dragon attacks the castle itself. That's when I knew.
That's when you knew what? Ash said.
That's when I knew that you were responsible.
Well, Ash said, much as I'd like to take credit for all of that, I can't see how you think I'm to blame. Well, maybe for those last two things, but he wasn't going to bring that up.
Your name is not Adam Freeman, Montaigne said triumphantly. Is it?
Ash looked up at him. Suddenly he was eager to face the King of Arden in no other skin than his own.
No, he said, it's not. How long did you think you could fool me? Long enough to kill you, I hoped. It should have been obvious. Montaigne shook his head. I can only think that the breaker clouded my eyes. That first night when you came walking out of the flames and raised the baker from the dead, I should have known. That was unnatural. Then you insinuated yourself into the healing service so that you could get to the girl with the mage mark. You were the one who asked me to treat her, Ash said. I was blinded by sorcery. Otherwise I would have known. But tonight I will do what I should have done in the first place.
He paused as if to build suspense.
I will kill you.
Fragmented thoughts swirled through Ash's mind. This doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't he try to keep me alive and hold me hostage? Or break my mother's heart by torturing me to death? Maybe he'll send the pieces home in a box, the way he did with Hannah.
You are going to lose, Ash said. I don't care how many of us you kill. We will never surrender. You will pay for murdering my father and my sister, and you will pay for Jenna. You never should have picked a fight with the Grey Wolf Queens.
The king didn't seem to hear him.
Behold your redemption, demon.
The king thrust a stoneware jar into Ash's face. That was the opening he needed. Ash jabbed the sting into the king's forearm. Gerard didn't even notice. Ash withdrew the needle and let it fall. He released a long, shuddering sigh. There. It was done. Finally.
Behold your redemption, demon,
the king repeated, apparently miffed at the lack of response.
What's that?
Ash asked. The king rocked the jar. It sloshed.
This is oil, he smiled. The only way to kill a demon is by burning.
Ash couldn't help wishing the poison he'd used was faster acting. If wishes were horses, even beggars would ride. Montaigne was mumbling to himself.
I should have known, but I didn't, not at first.
He refocused on Ash.
You see, I thought your kind had red hair.
Ash blinked at him, confused. He was the only one in his family with truly red hair.
What do you mean, your kind? Demons.
Demons? Ash stared at Montaigne.
Hang on, you think I'm an actual demon? It's my fault for agreeing to use mages in the war and so violating the Maker's laws, Montaigne said. I had become convinced that one had to use witchery against witchery in order to win. But now I know that all I did was open the door to sin and depravity. That's the thing about demons. You have to invite them in. I should have listened to Father Forsnot and burned you that first night. From tonight forward, everything changes. I will send the hand into every corner of the Empire and cleanse it of every tainted person. It begins with you.
Raising the jar, he dumped it over Ash's head, managing to splatter it all over himself as well. He tossed the jar over, then stalked to the inside wall and yanked a torch from its bracket. He returned to the edge, his face monstrous in the light from the flames. "By the great saint," he said, raising the torch with both hands. "Die, demon!" But the torch never came down. Instead, someone grabbed the king's torch arm and jammed it down so the burning head ignited his clothing. Montaigne screamed and stumbled forward, his arms and legs pinwheeling wildly as he toppled over the edge. Ash flattened himself against the tower wall to avoid being struck as the king screamed past him like a falling star. The screaming ended abruptly when he hit bottom. "Die, demon," Ash murmured. Cautiously, he raised his head and peered up to see someone looking down at him. "Are you all right?" Ash was momentarily speechless. It was Queen Marina, dressed in a nightgown, her hair caught into a long braid. She looked very young. "Are you all right?" she repeated a little impatiently. "We may not have much time."
Yes,"
Ash croaked. She dropped a rope over the side. "Grab hold of this carefully, please, and wrap it around your waist. The last thing I want is to lose you when you've held on for so long." He grabbed hold, despite his oil-slicked hands, and walked up the side of the building until he could slide over the edge on his belly. He lay there, gasping for a moment, then rolled over and sat up. Queen Marina dangled his amulet in front of him. "I believe this is yours." Ash practically snatched it out of her hand and dropped the chain over his head, grateful to feel the weight of it again. Oil dripped from his hair and down his neck. He crawled to the edge and looked down at the crumpled body of the king. He'd landed in an inner courtyard, and no one seemed to have noticed yet. He would have thought his enemy's death would be more satisfying, but all he felt was mingled grief and relief. Grief for those who had died too soon, and relief that perhaps this chapter was over. Marina came up beside him, looked down and shuddered. "Thank the Maker he's dead," she said, her voice trembling. "I was beginning to think he was immortal."
"But how did you—"
Ash couldn't seem to complete a coherent sentence. "I've been his favorite target for years," Marina said, fussing absently with the ties at the ends of her sleeves. "I kept thinking that someone would kill the loathsome bastard for me. If it happened soon enough, I might be named regent over Prince Jarrett. I'm used to biding my time. But lately the king had started in on Madeleine. I knew the time would come that I would no longer be able to protect her. So, a year ago, I decided to kill the king myself. It had to be in a way that would not be traced back to me." She smiled crookedly at Ash. "I'm a Tomlin. You'd think I'd be good at this sort of thing, but it turned out to be harder than I'd thought. The snake seemed perfect, but—" She shrugged. "I'm truly sorry about Estelle. I didn't mean for her to be the one to pay for it." Ash remembered what he'd said when he and Lila had discussed it, when she tried to blame it on him. Either this would-be killer is an amateur, or someone wants to put the king on his guard.
"What about the wassail? Was that yours too?"
She nodded, shrugging.
"But why did you drink it, if you knew that it was poisoned?"
"That was a low point," she said, wincing. "I was beginning to think I'd never be rid of him. When I saw that the king wasn't going to drink it, I decided to drink it myself. If I survived, it would direct suspicion away from me. If I died, I wouldn't have to live with that bastard pretender any longer. You are too skilled a healer, I'm afraid." Ash recalled what Montaigne had said just before the feast of St. Malthus.
"You stupid slut of Tamron. What happens now? Do you think they'll suspect you?"
She shook her head. "It's unlikely. Everyone in Arden thinks of me as the king's doormat. Plus,
The king has been growing more and more erratic these past weeks. After the attack, he seemed clearly unhinged. I've never seen him like that. No one will be surprised that he took his own life."
"That may have been the effect of the living silver," Ash said.
Marina frowned. "What do you mean?"
"That was supposedly a gift from the Empress," Ash said. "I slipped it in with the diamonds she sent to the king. It's a mercury compound that comes from some of our hot springs up north. When heated, it releases a deadly vapor. I told him it was white magic, that it could be used to keep away demons if he burned it all night. If it didn't kill him, I hoped that it would make him sick enough that he would come seeking treatment from me."
Marina laughed. "How many assassins does it take to kill a king?"
"And so your son will come to the throne."
She bit her lip. "He will. I only hope that he'll accept some guidance from me." She gestured toward the stairwell. "I think you'd better be on your way. They'll be up here before long to find out what happened. Give my greetings to your mother, the Queen. Tell her I'll never forget the way she looked at her name-day party. So beautiful and strong and confident. She has always been something of a role model for me." Ash had been making for the stairwell, but now he turned back toward her.
"You know who I am."
He was all but numb to surprises by now. Marina smiled. "I've known since Solstice. Despite opinions to the contrary, I am not stupid." 43.
Parting of the Ways.
In the days following the attack on the palace, Ash barely slept. He scoured the city for any sign of Jenna, alive or dead. He questioned people who had collected souvenirs in the streets, chunks of stone and roof tiles, along with other bits of debris. Some had been wakened from their beds when the dragon smashed into the upper floors of the palace, twice. Not long after, some saw it careening away from the castle close, flying east toward the sea. Rumors flew that the dragon had incinerated entire villages along the way, that an army of dragons was assembling in the mountains north of Delphi, that the Witch Queen had been seen driving a carriage pulled by dragons through the sky, that dragons had attacked ships at the wharf and destroyed one of them. The official story, that the damage had been caused by a bomb planted by Felsian operatives, gained little traction. Destin Karn was put in charge of an investigation into the king's death, which wrapped up quickly. He found no evidence of foul play. The official verdict, a tragic accident while the king was assessing damage to the palace. The unofficial cause of death, suicide. Ash tried to meet with Karn several times, but Karn seemed to be avoiding him. He knows something, Ash thought, but it was too risky to push, considering his own role in the scheme of things. The Queen made a lovely and gracious widow. In the days immediately following the death of the king, she issued a number of quiet pardons and executive orders. Among those, that Adam Freeman had been uncollared in recognition of his service to the crown. Ash and Lila watched Jarrett's coronation from the gallery. It was spare and rather rushed, as coronations went. No doubt Jarrett didn't want to give the rest of Thanes time to organize an alternative. The heir looked every inch a king as he presided at the feast afterward. Tall, dark-haired, handsome. Father Fosnot sat on one side of him, Lord Bodetort on the other, Bodetort's daughter next to him. The Queen and the Princess were seated halfway down the table. General Karn was still in the field, jockeying with Lord Madelon, and Destin Karn was out of the city. Security was extremely tight. Tasters tried every course before the new king dug in. Some things hadn't changed. Ash and Lila had already packed up their things and moved into an inn outside the castle close. Lila's excuse was that she was heading back to the Fells to collect more goods for smuggling. Ash had made up a story about a position with a healer in Bruin Swallow. No one was happier to see Ash go than Master Merrill.
"That's a smart move, boy, to gain more experience before you practice in a challenging setting like this. Hard work is the path to improvement. Out in the countryside, the need is great, and the standards not so high."
Ash nodded, as if filing away wisdom.
"Perhaps, when I have more experience, I could come back to Arden's court and— "No!" Merrill blurted. He collected himself. "Training takes time, and I've spent all the time on you that I can spare."
Harold and Boyd, at least, were sorry to see Ash go. Boyd gave Ash a knife with a carved handle, and Harold gave him a book he'd stolen from the healer's library. Ash ignored their hints that they'd like to come along.
"You both really have come a long way," Ash said. "If you'd like to learn more, you might consider the Healer's Academy at Odin's Ford." "Odin's Ford," Harold said, wide-eyed. "That's for blue bloods." "Odin's Ford is for everyone who wants to learn," Ash said, shouldering his healer's kit. "Good luck."
Their last night in Arden's court, Ash and Lila shared supper at the inn, making plans for departure.
"You're really coming back with me?"
Lila said, blotting her lips.
"You're not going to drug my wine and abandon me at a campsite, are you?"
Ash shook his head.
"It's time I went home."
He slid his hand inside his shirt, where Jenna's pendant hung next to his serpent amulet. Both represented losses.
"What changed your mind?"
"Spending time in Arden has awakened my patriotism, I suppose."
That was part of it, but the truth was more complicated. 4 years ago, he'd run away and left his mother and sister on their own to deal with his father's death. For 4 years, he'd done as he liked, rationalizing that he was doing his bit for the queendom, never considering what they might want or need from him. He'd been selfish and a coward, and losing Jenna seemed like a penance for that. Maybe he'd deserved it, but not Jenna. He'd intended to take her home before her death. Now going home seemed like the right thing to do. He had a lot to make up for, if that was even possible. Sometimes home is where you need to go for healing. Time would tell whether Arden under King Jared would change its warlike ways. Meanwhile, there was work to be done at home.
"Are you sorry you didn't get to kill Montaigne all on your own?"
Lila asked. Ash thought about it, then shook his head.
"I wanted him dead, I'll admit. I think the world is a better place without him. But I'm beginning to realize that revenge is never as satisfying as you think it will be. Sometimes there's a high price."
The irony didn't escape him. If he hadn't come to Arden's court to kill Montaigne, he'd never have met Jenna. He'd never have fallen in love with her. And maybe she would still be alive.
"We did manage to quash any chance of a deal between Arden and Carthus. That's something."
"That's something," Ash said, turning his mug between his hands. It might be something, but it felt like nothing.
"There are a lot of loose ends, though. The dragon, for instance."
Ash shrugged.
"I'm thinking it might be dead. It was heavily armored, but still, to crash through the stone wall of a castle like that, it must have been badly injured. Maybe it hid away somewhere to die." He paused. "Strange."
"What's strange?"
"Animals usually have more sense than that. It's only humans that tend to bang their heads against a stone wall."
"I wonder if we'll ever find out why the Empress was so eager to get hold of Jenna."
"Sometimes I wonder if the Empress wasn't just made up, a story Strangward told in order to get what he wanted."
"Which was?"
Lila raised an eyebrow.
"I don't know," Ash said.
"Any news about—"
"No."
"Is it possible the Carthians kidnapped her? I mean, 2 of them were found dead in her room,
And Strangward's gone missing too.
Anything's possible. But even if I knew for sure that's what happened, I wouldn't know where to start looking.
I'm sorry about Jenna, Lila said, her eyes dark with sympathy. If you want to stay on longer and keep looking, I'm good with that.
Ash shook his head. Something would have turned up by now, he said. Even though it was the middle of the night, somebody should have seen something.
Remember what I said back at Odin's Ford? About hope? Ash frowned, trying to remember.
While I try and treasure up every word that comes out of your mouth, I can't.
Hope is the thing that can't be reined in by rules or pinned down by bitter experience. It's a blessing and a curse. Lila raised her glass. To hope.
To hope,
Ash said.
They clanked. Now, Ash said, let's go home.
Epilogue. In another tavern, far away in the port city of Spirit Gate, Evan Strangward killed time, nursing an ale and playing nicks and bones with himself. He'd glamoured his appearance so that to any but his storm-sworn guard he wore the brown skin and straight black hair of a traveller from Wiehenhaven. He shivered and turned up the collar of his coat. He sat close to the door so that every time it opened, the raw wind from the Indio howled in. He'd chosen this seat on purpose, so he wouldn't miss anyone coming and going. He'd been too long in these wetlands. He would be glad to go back to the sun-baked land he called home, for multiple reasons. He heard familiar footsteps and turned. It was Tezza. Just Tezza. It was what he'd expected. It was what he'd demanded, in fact, but he was still disappointed.
"My lord,"
Tezza said, shoulders slumping in relief.
"Thank the Maker."
Evan smiled.
"Ah, Tezza, I can't imagine that the Maker is looking after the likes of me. I've not seen any sign of it so far."
He stood, opened his arms, and they embraced.
"Destin didn't insist on coming with you?"
Evan asked, reclaiming his seat. Tezza shook his head.
"He said he could be of more use to you in Arden's court. Not if he's dead. He says he has no plans to be dead, my lord."
Tezza settled into the empty chair. I don't want him to be of use to me, Evan thought. I want him to forget about me. I want him to kill that monster of a father, leave Arden, and find a house by the sea. I want him to be happy.
"The plans we make are not the problem," Evan said. "It is the machinations of others. Did you give him the money?"
Tezza shook his head, handing over a small pouch.
"I tried. He refused it."
Again, Evan wasn't surprised, but he was disappointed. He signaled for the server.
"You've lost weight,"
Tezza said. He looked travel-worn and hollow-cheeked himself.
Evan rolled his eyes. "It never takes you very long to start in nagging. It's this rich wetland food. We'll be fine once we get back to salt pork, whey bread, and rations of rum." "When you were late," Tezza said, I didn't know what might have happened. I usually travel much faster by sea than you would by land, but I ran into trouble in Middle Sea, and I had to sail farther north to make a landing." "The Empress?"
Evan nodded.
"The entire port was infested with Selly's spies. I think she's planning to come find the girl herself. Everything points that way. I'd hoped to sail from there, but it was too risky. We need to be gone before she arrives. I suspect she'll land at Baston Bay. She's one to go straight for the heart."
The server arrived tableside.
"2 ales and 2 lamb pies," Evan said. "My favorites,"
Tezza said, smiling as the server hustled away.
"Were you able to arrange for a ship?"
Tezza nodded.
"She's a 2-masted schooner. No match for Sun Spirit, but she'll do, I think. How many of the storm swarm did we lose? Evan asked. Can we crew a schooner? We lost Ephraim and Trey on the ship, Tessa said, plus the 2 in the tower. I don't like to hire casual crew. They ask too many questions and talk too much after. I'll just have to make do with what we have. He paused. Could Des tell you anything more about what happened down at the harbor? Tessa scowled. It's like someone spilled a box of puzzle pieces, and none of them fit together. Ephraim and Trey were in the pilot house. They had stab wounds and slashes all over their bodies and apparently bled to death before the explosion. In and around the hold, there were 7 dead priests. Priests? Evan rocked back in his chair, resting the heels of his hands on the edge of the table. Tessa nodded. Most were badly burned. It looked like they tried to go down into the hold and somehow the dragon got out of the collar and flamed them, then escaped. Doctrinal differences, no doubt. My lord? The church flames mages, and dragons flame priests. Oh, I see, my lord.
Evan sighed. Destin would have understood immediately. Tessa was willing, but Evan's humor usually went right over his head.
It seems that somebody who knew what he was doing used explosives to blow up the ship.
Tessa set his bag on the table and opened it.
Destin found 2 collars in the hold. There was this one.
He held up the collar they'd used on the dragon.
And this.
He handed over another silver collar in a smaller size. Evan tapped the runes etched into the silver.
Why is this familiar? According to Destin, this is the collar that the healer wore.
Evan looked up, puzzled. The healer? Had he met a healer?
The collared mage at the meeting, the one responsible for magical threats. Speaking of threats, you'll find some interesting enhancements to that.
He pointed his chin at the neckpiece.
Ah.
Evan saw what Tessa meant. The collar was typical of flashcraft, except for the tiny bottles and pouches attached to the inside.
Something tells me that these are not medicinal.
He shook his head, bemused.
What would he have been doing on my ship? We barely spoke. Someone wanted to prevent us from making a deal with Montaigne, Tessa said.
More likely, they wanted to prevent the Empress from making a deal with Montaigne, Evan said.
Could it have been agents from the Fells? That's the common opinion, Tessa said. The entire countryside is in a frenzy of superstition. The churches are packed. They think the Wolf Queen is going to send more dragons swooping down on them. One day I'll have to meet this demon queen and see if she really eats babies for supper.
Maybe I'll sail north, he thought, instead of east.
Just wait until they meet the Empress. I hope they don't,
Evan said, his smile dying away.
I hope I'm wrong.
He cleared his throat.
Any word on who killed Montaigne? Rumor has it that he killed himself. He was despondent over recent events and went a little crazy.
Evan snorted.
If true, it would be the first good deed he's ever done. But I don't believe it. Somebody finally got to him.
He raised his glass.
To dead Montaigne,
he said softly. Tessa raised his own glass.
To dead Montaigne.
They clanked.
See, it wasn't a complete disaster. Montaigne is dead, and we prevented the Empress from getting hold of the Mage Marth girl. That's something. But Jenna Bandelow is dead too. And we don't know any more than we did before. We don't even know what her gift really was.
Evan brushed his fingers over the back of his neck, tracing the symbol embedded there. Different from Jenna's, and yet somehow connected. rooted in the same magic, the same history.
You didn't kill the girl. She'd still be alive if I hadn't intervened. Maybe not for long. In any event, we couldn't risk leaving her there for the Empress to find. We couldn't chance an even more powerful Celestine.
The food came. Evan waited until the server moved away again, then leaned in, pitching his voice low.
Why does my life count for more than Jenna's? She was smart and brave, Tessa. I think we would have been friends. It seems like we should be allies. It's one thing to kill someone because they know too much. It's another to kill someone because they can't provide the answers you don't have yourself. What do you think Sally will do when she finds out the girl is dead? What she always does. She'll go back to hunting me. Maybe I should just get it over with and arrange a meeting.
No, Tessa said, too loudly. He looked around. Several people were staring, but they hurriedly returned to their meals.
Look, he said softly, no one can fault you for trying to survive. No one but me, Evan said. I always put the ones I love at risk. He paused. It's getting late. Let's finish up so you can walk me down to this ship you found. We'll need to be ready to catch the tide.
This is Kim, My Guest. We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of Flamecaster by Cinda Williams Chima. This program was produced by Dion Audio Services. Executive producer Caitlin Gehring. Text copyright 2016 by Cinda Williams Chima. Production copyright 2016 by HarperCollins Publishers. All rights reserved. Thank you for listening.